Hi guys, and welcome to America History Tales. Tonight we step into the worst slums of 1900s America, where the street glistens with yesterday's run horse. Muck, coal dust, and the faint shine of gas lamps trembling in dirty windows. You stand at the edge of a crowded block hearing pushcart wheels coughing, children shouted bargains and a baby crying somewhere above your head. The air is thick enough to chew, which is helpful, because supper may not be coming quickly. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this with your modern laundry habits intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell us where you're watching from and what your local time is, because somewhere someone is listening at midnight while you are just beginning this walk. Now, dim the lights and follow the curb where the gutters run dark. You trudge into the Lower East Side, though places like this exist in Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore, New Orleans, and San Francisco too. The year sits somewhere around 1900, give or take a few smoky seasons, and America is booming in the newspapers. Steel rises, railroads stretch, factories roar, and rich men build houses large enough to confuse a visiting cousin. But here, wealth feels very far away. Here you measure progress by whether your boots stay dry. The first thing you notice is not a building, it is closeness. People pass so near that sleeves brush sleeves. A woman with a shawl over her hair carries a pail, her face tired but sharply awake. A boy darts between carts with newspapers under one arm. A fish seller calls out in a voice roughened by cold mornings. Somewhere onions fry in cheap fat, and that smell briefly wins its little war against sewage, damp wool, old cabbage, and the horse stable around the corner. The streets are not quiet. Sleepy, yes, in the way a tired body can still mutter in its dreams, but never quiet. Wheels clatter over stones. Horses snort. A drunk laughs too loudly. A mother scolds in Italian. A tailor coughs upstairs. A baby wails, then stops, then starts again, because even babies here seem to understand the city works in shifts. By 1900, New York's Lower East Side has become one of the most densely populated urban districts in the world. That is the mainstream fact, plain and heavy. In some blocks, thousands of people live packed into a space that would make a modern apartment listing say cozy with criminal optimism. Tenements rise 5 or 6 stories high, brick faces darkened by soot windows crammed with laundry, bedding cages, plants, and occasionally a person leaning out for air as if trying to sip the sky. You look upward. Fire escapes cling to walls like iron vines. They're supposed to promise safety, but they also hold mattresses, chairs, crates, flower pots, and sleeping bodies in summer. Because when your room becomes an oven, the metal balcony outside starts to look almost luxurious. Not safe exactly, but breezy. And breezy is a kind of wealth. At a street level, the buildings seem to lean over you. Their doorways are shadowed, their steps worn smooth by thousands of feet. You pause by one entrance and feel the sticky damp rising from the hall. Inside waits the staircase, narrow and dark, smelling of kerosene boiled, laundry, stale smoke, and human patience stretched very thin. You're not going in yet. Not fully. For now. You are still outside letting the neighbourhood announce itself. A pushcart rolls past, piled with pickles floating in cloudy brine. Barrels of herring gleam silver. Apples sit bruised but tempting. A vendor sells hot corn, another sells old clothes. A woman fingers a second-hand coat, checking seams with the seriousness of a banker inspecting gold. You hear coins-counted arguments softened by familiarity and the soft slap of wet fish wrapped in paper. The street is market, playground, gossip hall, workplace and living room. Children play near gutters because where else should they go? A little girl balances on the curb with intense concentration as if the curb is a palace wall and not a strip of stone beside suspicious puddles. Boys chase each other under wagon wheels with the cheerful confidence of people who have not yet learned how fragile ankles are. A policeman strolls by swinging his club known here as a nightstick. His uniform gives him authority but not necessarily trust. People watch him without quite watching him. In neighbourhoods like this, law arrives with a human face, and that face may be kind, bored, corrupt, helpful, brutal, or simply hungry for a free apple. You learn quickly that power has moods. Above you, windows glow yellow. Behind them, families eat, sow, quarrel, pray, cough, and sleep in rooms so crowded that even silence must stand sideways. Rent consumes wages like a creature with excellent teeth. Landlords may never appear except through agents, but their presence is felt in every cracked wall and every demand due on Saturday. Historians still argue whether the word slum tells us more about real suffering, or about the fears of middle-class observers who wandered through with notebooks and moral opinions. That argument matters, because from the outside a place like this can look only miserable. From within it is also home network language, survival memory, and sometimes even pride. You do not romanticize it. Please, no. The smells alone would end that nonsense, but you also do not flatten it into a pity postcard. Here is a quirky tidbit to tuck into your sleeve. Some reformers and visitors were so fascinated by slumming that by the late 19th century, guided tours through poor districts became a kind of uncomfortable entertainment for the curious well-off. Imagine dressing nicely to go stare at overcrowding. Humanity really does have a talent for making tourism weird. You keep walking, the pavement changes underfoot. Some stretches are slick, some broken, some patched with boards. Trash piles near the curb waiting for collection that may or may not arrive before rats hold a committee meeting. Ash cans overflow. Stray cats move like little shadows with opinions. A horse drops something fresh into the street and nobody gasps, because this is not a dramatic event, it is Tuesday. Still, there is life everywhere. A synagogue doorway fills with men speaking softly. A Catholic church bell sounds from a nearby block. A Chinese laundry sign hangs farther off. Irish, Jewish, Italian, German, Black, Greek, Polish, Syrian, and other communities shape different corners of the American city, each carrying old customs into new brick canyons. The result is noisy, tense, inventive, and exhausting. America calls itself a melting pot, but down here it often feels more like a boiling pot with no one agreeing on the recipe. You pass a basement shop where light spills from a low window. Someone is still working. Needlework maybe, cigar rolling perhaps. In slum districts the boundary between home and labour blurs until the day has no clean edge. A room may be bedroom, kitchen, nursery, workshop and boarding space all at once. Modern, you may complain when a laptop follows you to the couch. Here, work climbs into bed and asks for rent. The gas lamps flicker. Their glow is soft, almost pretty, which feels rude considering what they reveal. A man sleeps sitting against a wall hat tipped forward. A young woman hurries past with bread tucked under her arm. Two boys share a joke in a language you do not know, then laugh so hard one nearly drops his bundle. You feel the strange mix of hardship and ordinary life, and that is the key. Nobody wakes up thinking I am a historical example of urban poverty. They wake up thinking about breakfast, wages, shoes, coughs, neighbours' debts, and whether the baby will sleep. As the night deepens, the street does not empty so much as thin. The noise lowers, hooves sound farther away, voices become softer, leaking from windows and doorways. You look again at the tenement entrance, that dark mouth of brick, and stares. The city has shown you its surface, crowded and restless, but the real story waits inside, where rooms hold too many bodies and too little air, where the day's heat lingers in plaster and where sleep, if it comes, must find a narrow place to lie down beside everyone else. You step through the tenement doorway, and the street behind you becomes a muffled thing, still alive, still muttering, but now filtered through brickwood and the smell of too many dinners. The hallway is dark, even though evening has not fully settled. A weak strip of light slips through the open door and dies on the first landing. Somewhere above, a child coughs with the steady rhythm of a tired little engine. Your hand touches the banister. It feels greasy from years of palms, coal, soot, and damp air. The stairs creak under your weight. They do not sound surprised. They have carried everyone, fathers home from docks, mothers with baskets, children with bare feet, boarders with bundles, doctors with black bags, landlords' agents with rent books, and occasionally a report. Trying not. Look horrified. You climb. The air changes by the floor. At the bottom it smells of street mud, smoke and wet wool. 1 flight up onions, 2 flights up boiled cabbage, 3 flights up kerosene soap and the sourness of laundry that never quite dried. By the 4th floor the air has become a stew of human breath cooking fat sickness. Babies, sir, stale bedding and hope doing its best under poor conditions. Here is the room. Not a room you would choose from a cheerful rental website. No polished floors, no charming exposed brick, no little fern by a sunny window. This is a cramped tenement apartment, sometimes called a flat, though that word sounds far too tidy. It may hold 3 rooms if the family is lucky. A kitchen, a small bedroom and a dark interior room with no direct window at all. If they are not lucky, 1 room must do everything. By the early 1900s, many American tenement families took in lodgers to help pay rent. That is the plain historical fact sitting right on the table beside the chipped cup and the bread knife. A family already crowded into a few rooms might rent a corner, a mattress, or even a shared bed to a single worker. Privacy becomes a luxury item like oranges in winter or shoes without holes. You stand near the doorway and try to understand how people fit. A mother moves between stove and table with careful side steps. A father sits on a chair that must also serve as storage. 2 children share a mattress. A baby sleeps in a drawer lined with cloth because furniture here learns many trades. A teenage girl mends a sleeve near the window, catching the last honest light of the day. A boarder keeps his bundle under the bed and his opinions mostly to himself. The room is warm, but not kindly warm. It is crowded warm, breath warm, stove warm, bodies packed into corners warm. In summer, this heat swells until walls seem to sweat. In winter, the warmth retreats toward the stove, leaving the edges of the room cold enough to make fingers stiff. Either way, the room demands compromise. You notice the wallpaper if there is wallpaper peeling in soft curls. The plaster has cracks. The ceiling has stains from some old leak that nobody owns. A tiny shelf holds a few treasures, a prayer book, a photograph, a cheap vase, a shell from a faraway coast, a cracked figurine, maybe a paper flower made by patient hands. Even in the worst housing people decorate, they insist on beauty, sometimes no bigger than a ribbon pinned to a wall. That small insistence matters. It says this is not merely shelter, this is ours. But the room has rules. Do not waste coal. Do not knock over the lamp. Do not step on the sleeping child. Do not speak too loudly when someone has come off a night shift. Do not complain too much because complaint uses energy, and energy must be saved for wages, washing, carrying, cooking, stitching, bargaining and climbing all these stairs again. A bed sits against the wall if the family owns one. It may be shared in shifts. In some crowded districts, hot bedding appears where one person rises for work and another slips into the same warm place. The phrase sounds almost cozy until you think about exhaustion, sweat sickness, and the total absence of personal space. Modern, you may dislike sharing a hotel blanket. Here, you may be grateful for a blanket at all. See, the bar has gone underground. Historians still debate how much overcrowding was driven by landlord greed, immigrant poverty, cultural patterns of extended family living, or the brutal, simple fact that cities grew faster than safe housing could be built. The answer naturally refuses to sit neatly in one chair. Landlords did profit. Families did make strategic choices. New arrivals did cluster near familiar language and work. Laws did lag, and poor people as usual were expected to perform miracles with arithmetic. Rent presses on the room like an invisible hand. The landlord might not live nearby. The building may be owned by someone who sees it as a line in a ledger. Repairs cost money, and money prefers not to visit the poor unless it comes to collect something. So a broken stair remains broken, a window sticks, a roof leaks, rats find openings that owners never seem able to locate, which is impressive, because the rats manage it nightly. You hear scratching in the wall, maybe mice, maybe rats. Nobody celebrates either option. A child looks toward the sound and then looks away. You learn to live with background dangers the way you live with weather. Not calmly exactly, but continuously. The window is precious. If the room has one facing the street or courtyard, it becomes a lung. It admits light, gossip smells, soot flies, and the voices of neighbours. If it opens onto an air shaft, that narrow vertical slit between buildings, then fresh air becomes a polite fiction. Air shafts were meant to ventilate interior rooms, but in many old tenements they became handles for smoke, garbage smells, and arguments rising floor to floor like unwanted music. Here is a quirky tidbit for the drowsy historian in you. Some tenement residents kept small songbirds in cages by the window, not just for cheer, but because birds brought sound, colour, and a tiny illusion of countryside into rooms where actual countryside might as well have been the moon. Imagine a canary trying to outsing a pushcart vendor, a baby and a neighbour dragging furniture. Brave little performer, terrible acoustics. Now the family prepares for sleep, not in the leisurely way you might prepare with soft pyjamas and maybe an unnecessary glass of water. Here sleep is an arrangement. Chairs are shifted, a table is cleared, bedding is unfolded, children are placed like puzzle pieces. Someone takes the narrow mattress, someone takes the floor. A boarder turns his face toward the wall, the baby stirs, then sighs. A lamp is lowered to save oil. The room darkens, but darkness does not create privacy. You still hear breathing. You hear the soft rasp of cloth. You hear a spoon settle in a bowl. You hear the building itself creak as people above and below make the same nightly negotiations. Through the wall comes a murmur of prayer. Through the ceiling a thump, then a whisper, then a laugh, quickly smothered. A family may speak several languages in one evening. The old country at the table, English at work, a mix in the mouths of children. The room becomes a small borderland. Grandmother may not understand the teacher's notes. A son may translate a rent warning. A daughter may know which shop pays a few cents more for finishing work. In tight quarters, language itself becomes shared furniture. You look at the sleeping faces and feel the strange intimacy of poverty. Not romantic intimacy, forced intimacy, the kind where everyone knows who is hungry, who is coughing blood into a rag, who has lost work, who owes money, who has hidden a little coin in a sock, who misses home but would rather swallow a pin than admit it after crossing an ocean. The walls are thin. Secrets must become very small to survive. And still there is tenderness. A mother tucks cloth around a child's shoulder. A father removes his boots slowly so the baby does not wake. A sister gives her brother the less lumpy side of the mattress, perhaps after threatening him first because sainthood has limits. Someone reaches in the dark and finds another hand. Outside the city keeps breathing. Inside the room breathes with it close and hot and human. You begin to understand that daily life here is not one dramatic misery, but thousands of small adjustments. A chair moved, a lamp trimmed, a cough ignored, a rent coin saved, a window opened for 3 inches of air, a body folded around another body so everyone can fit until morning. And morning, of course, will bring water, washing lines, buckets, and the long wait for the ordinary things your own century hides behind clean taps and porcelain doors. Morning arrives before comfort does. It seeps into the room as a grey light thin as watered milk touching the wall, the stove, the bundled bedding, and the face is still trying to remain asleep. But the building is waking, and in a tenement one family's morning becomes everyone's morning. A baby protests, a chair scrapes, a kettle clanks somewhere below. A door slams so hard the whole stairwell seems to sigh. You sit up stiffly because sleeping here has given your bones a new and rather personal education. Around you people rise in sequence. There is no graceful stretching, no slow breakfast with a newspaper spread wide. Space does not allow luxury movements. Elbows must be negotiated. Feet must search carefully for floor. Someone mutters because someone else has stepped on a shoe a hand. Or possibly a dream. The first business of the day is water. In many older tenements, especially before reforms fully took hold, families might rely on shared pumps or hallway taps rather than private plumbing in each apartment. That is the mainstream fact, and it matters more than almost anything. Water is not an invisible servant here. It is a task. It has weight. It must be fetched, carried, saved, warmed, spilled, cursed at, and carried again. You follow a woman into the hallway. She has a pail in one hand and another tucked under her arm. The stairwell is already busy. Women and children move up and down with buckets, pitchers, basins, and faces that say, very clearly, do not block the landing unless you are planning to become furniture. The air is chilly, but the work warms the body quickly. Downstairs, the line forms near the shared tap. People wait not silently because silence would be suspicious, but with the low practical chatter of neighbours who know each other's business without needing a formal newsletter. A woman complains about the pressure. A boy tries to skip ahead and is corrected by 3 adults at once. Someone's pail leaks. Someone else has brought a cracked jug wrapped with cloth, which is either clever or tragic depending on how much water survives the trip upstairs. You lift a filled pail. It pulls at your shoulder immediately. Now imagine doing this daily, perhaps several times, while minding children work cooking, sickness, and stairs that feel longer with every step. Modern taps have made you arrogant. Be honest. You have let water run while brushing your teeth. Here that sound would be the music of royalty. Back in the room, water becomes many things. A little for tea, a little for washing faces, a little for scrubbing dishes, a little saved for cooking. If laundry must be done, the whole room changes. The stove heats water, steam gathers. Soap softens into cloudy streaks. Wet fabric slaps against the washboards with a dull rhythmic rasp. Laundry is not a side chore, it is a battle campaign. Shirts, underclothes, diapers, towels, aprons, sheets, if you are ambitious or desperate. All must be soaked, rubbed, wrung, rinsed, wrung again, and somehow dried in air, already crowded with breath and cooking smoke. The washboard bites the knuckles. Soap stings cracked skin. In winter, wet cloth chills the room. In summer, it turns the room into a damp little swamp with wallpaper. Historians continue to dispute whether domestic labour in slum homes should be understood mainly as unpaid family survival work, hidden economic production, or both at once. It is a useful argument because the woman scrubbing linen by the stove is not merely keeping house. She is preserving health, dignity, employability, and the faint public appearance that her family is managing. Clean collars can help a man keep work. Clean children may avoid shame at school. Clean bedding may be the only defence against vermin, though the vermin-rude little landlords of the mattress often decline to be impressed. Now comes the matter nobody likes, but everyone must face toilets. In many crowded districts, indoor private bathrooms are rare at the beginning of the century. Families may share privies in the yard. Hallway water closets or outdoor facilities that serve far too many people. The smell is not subtle. It does not politely remain where it belongs. It drifts, climbs, settles, and reminds everyone that sanitation is not an abstract reformer's word. It is the difference between ordinary discomfort and dangerous filth. You descend toward the yard, the path is damp, ash scraps and old straw cling near the walls. The privy stands where too many footsteps have turned the ground sour. You do not linger. Nobody does, unless gossip demands it, and gossip, as we know, has remarkable stamina. Flies gather in warm weather. In cold weather, the boards freeze, and now discomfort has invented a seasonal menu. A quirky little tidbit, if we can call anything about this cheerful, is that some families used old newspapers not just for reading, but for lining shelves, wrapping scrap stuff in cracks, and yes, for toilet purposes. A newspaper's second career could be very practical. Yesterday's politics might become today's plumbing solution. Democracy recycled. Back upstairs, children are scrubbed in turn. Faces first, hands next, necks if the adult in charge is feeling strict. Ears are inspected with the seriousness of a customs officer. A basin of water darkens quickly. The youngest child howls as if soap is an assassination attempt. An older sibling laughs and is immediately assigned extra help because mockery has consequences. Bathing is harder. A full bath requires water fuel time privacy and a tub or basin large enough to be useful. In a crowded room, all five are in short supply. Many people wash in pieces, face, hands, feet, underarms when possible, hair when necessary, pride whenever available. Public bathhouses appear in some cities as reformers push for cleanliness and they matter deeply, but access varies. Hours, distance, modesty, cost and habit all shape who uses them. You pass a public bathhouse later, it's brick front plain but promising. Inside, if you're lucky, there are showers or tubs, attendance rules, and the rare delight of warm water that does not have to be hauled up 4 flights by hand. For a few minutes, a body can feel almost new. Of course, it will soon return to the same soot, sweat, dust, and crowded stairs. Still, a few minutes can count. Never underestimate the mercy of warm water. The city itself is also trying to wash badly. Street cleaners push brooms through muck. Horses create daily mountains of manure. Garbage collection improves in some places, especially under reform-minded officials, but the work is uneven and never quite enough. Ash from coal stoves fills barrels. Fish heads, vegetable peelings, broken crockery, rags and dead rats all enter the urban inventory. The poor do not create all this dirt, but they live closest to its consequences. In the tenement room, wet clothes now hang from lines strung across the ceiling. They brush your face when you move. Shirts drip into a pan. Socks dangle like exhausted bats. The room smells of soap, steam, old wood and breakfast beginning to think about existing. A child complains that the only dry stockings are mismatched. A mother says feet do not care, the child being a child. Strongly disagrees, and yet the morning holds a rhythm. Fetch, heat, wash, rinse, wring, carry, clean, empty, repeat. These tasks are not glamorous, but they are the hidden machinery of survival. Without them, disease spreads faster, work clothes fail, shame deepens, babies suffer, and the household begins to unravel. The slum is held together not only by brick and rent, but by pails of water carried by tired arms. You stand by the window as steam clouds the glass. Outside, more laundry appears from neighbouring windows, strung on lines across shafts and yards, fluttering like flags of surrender and defiance at once. You remember the street from last night, its lamps and pushcarts and restless noise. Now you see the inner weather of the place, damp cloth, boiling kettles, shared taps, crowded privies, and people fighting dirt with tools too small for the job. Soon the room will turn toward food. Bread must be found, coffee stretched, pickles chosen, pennies counted, and hunger persuaded to wait politely for its turn. The steam fades, and with it the illusion that washing alone can satisfy a body. Hunger steps forward now, patient but insistent like a creditor who knows exactly where you live. The room shifts from soap and effort to food and calculation. You notice how quickly attention moves from cleanliness to calories, from damp sleeves to empty stomachs. Breakfast, if it deserves such a hopeful word, is modest. Bread appears first. It is the foundation, the reliable companion, the quiet hero that does not ask for applause. A loaf sits on the table, its crust firm, its inside already drying at the edges. Someone slices it carefully because slices are decisions. Too thick and the loaf disappears too soon. Too thin and the eater feels cheated by geometry. Coffee or something, pretending to be coffee, is poured. It may be stretched with chicory, a bitter root that fills the cup when beans are scarce. The taste is sharp, a little smoky, a little stubborn, but it warms the chest. A child wrinkles a nose and drinks anyway. Warmth matters more than flavour here. Pickles join the table, their brine bright and aggressive. A small piece of cheese might appear if luck has been cooperative. Sometimes there is herring salty and shining its scent strong enough to wake a sleepy neighbour. On better mornings, perhaps an egg is shared divided with the care of a surgeon. On worse mornings, bread and coffee must carry the day until noon. In working-class districts around 1900, diets often leaned heavily on inexpensive staples like bread potatoes, cabbage, and preserved fish with fresh meat, appearing only occasionally. That simple fact sits quietly in the room, explaining why meals feel repetitive, why flavors repeat, why hunger never quite forgets its address. You chew slowly not because the bread demands it, but because stretching a meal is an art form. Conversation rises and falls around the table. A father speaks about work prospects. A mother reminds a child to finish every crumb. A boarder eats quickly, eyes on the clock because lateness costs money. Someone jokes about the pickles being strong enough to walk off the plate. The joke lands. Humour. Even small humour is a kind of seasoning. Outside the street, vendors are already at work. You step out for a moment, drawn by the sound of wheels and voices. Pushcarts line the curb, their wooden frames creaking under the weight of goods. A man sells apples, not perfect apples, but apples with character, which is a polite way of saying bruises. A woman sells pretzels, their twisted shapes warm and inviting. Another vendor offers pickled cucumbers from a barrel, fishing them out with a practiced hand. Coins pass from hand to hand. Every purchase is a negotiation between need and possibility. A mother examines a cabbage, pressing it gently, testing its promise. A vendor swears it is the finest cabbage in 3 boroughs. She raises an eyebrow that says she has heard this speech before. They settle on a price that offends them both equally, which is the traditional sign of a fair deal. There is a rhythm to these exchanges, a choreography learned through repetition. Vendors call out their goods in accents that carry across oceans. Buyers respond with skepticism sharpened by necessity. Children hover, hoping for a free taste, a dropped crumb, a moment of kindness. Sometimes they succeed. Sometimes they are sent away with a look that says, "Come back when you have a coin." You notice how food travels. It carries memory. Italian families cook pasta with tomatoes. Jewish families prepare soups, rich with tradition. Irish households rely on potatoes and bread. Chinese kitchens produce dishes that smell unfamiliar and wonderful. The street becomes a moving map of the world, each cart a small embassy of flavour. Yet the abundance is deceptive. There is variety, yes, but not always access. Money decides the menu. A penny can mean the difference between a full stomach and a hollow one. You see a child counting coins, lips moving silently, calculating whether a piece of fruit is within reach. The arithmetic of hunger is relentless. It does not allow mistakes. There is a small, curious detail worth noting. Some families kept a jar of pickle brine or soup broth not just for flavour but as a way to stretch meals. A slice of bread dipped into something tangy or savoury could trick the body into feeling more satisfied. It is a humble strategy but effective. The body can be persuaded, at least for a while. Back inside the meal concludes with the quiet efficiency of people who cannot linger. Plates are cleared, crumbs are gathered. Nothing is wasted. Even the smallest piece of bread finds a purpose. A child might tuck it away for later, a secret reserve against the unpredictable hours ahead. The room returns to its many roles. The table becomes a workspace again. A needle appears, thread pulled through fabric with steady hands. A man prepares to leave, adjusting his coat, checking his pockets, ensuring he carries what little he owns. A woman ties a scarf, ready to face the day's demands. Children gather their things, some heading to school, others to work, all stepping into a world that expects more from them than their years might suggest. There is a conversation that lingers in the air, one that thinkers and observers have returned to again and again. Some believe that the diet of the poor, while limited, was sufficient to sustain life and labour. Others point to the signs of malnutrition, the thin faces, the tired eyes, the illnesses that follow a body stretched too far. The truth likely sits somewhere in between. shaped by circumstance, luck, and the small choices made at every meal. You step back towards the window, watching the street fill with movement. The vendors call, the buyers respond, the city hums. Hunger has been quieted, not silenced. It will return as it always does, a faithful companion in a place where food is both necessity and challenge. As the morning deepens, the focus shifts once more. Children gather in groups, their energy rising, their voices bright against the backdrop of adult concerns. They will carry the day forward now into alleys and streets, into games, and work into a childhood that is anything but simple. Children spill into the street like marbles from a cracked pocket, quick, noisy, bright, and not nearly as breakable as they look, though the city does its best to test that theory. You follow them down the stairs, past the walls rubbed shiny by shoulders and sleeves, past the lingering smells of breakfast soap and damp wool, and out into the morning light where the alley waits like a second school. The street belongs to adults in theory. In practice, children occupy every open inch. They perch on stoops, crouch beside gutters, chase one another around pushcarts, and shout across the road with the confidence of tiny emperors. Their playground is not fenced or padded. There is no soft rubber surface, no cheerful sign reminding everyone to take turns. There are cobblestones, horse droppings, broken glass cellar doors, barrels, crates, wheels, stray dogs, and the occasional adult yelling, which may or may not be part of the game. A mainstream historical fact comes quietly but firmly into view. Child labour remained common in American cities around 1900. Especially among poor families who depended on every possible wage. Children sold newspapers, carried bundles, helped in shops, worked in factories, stitched garments at home, minded younger siblings, delivered goods, shined shoes, sorted rags, and did whatever small hands could be paid to do. Childhood here is not a protected meadow. It is a narrow strip of pavement between responsibility and mischief. You watch a newsboy swing a bundle under one arm and cry out headlines with a voice bigger than his body. He has learned which corners pay, which customers tip, and which older boys are best avoided. His cap sits low over his brow and his fingers are already ink-stained. He does not read every word he sells, but he knows enough to make disaster sound urgent, warfare, murder, scandal, election. All become music in his mouth. Nearby, a girl no older than 10 carries a baby on one hip while tugging a smaller child by the hand. She walks with the practiced lean of someone who's done this before. The baby's head rests against her shoulder. The toddler drags one foot and complains. She ignores him not from cruelty, but from professional experience. Every older sister in the tenement seems to earn a private degree in crowd control. You pass boys playing stickball with a broom handle, and a ball so battered it looks like it has survived several administrations. A man shouts for them to move. They move exactly 3 feet, which is technically obedience if you are feeling generous. A cart rumbles past the horse's hooves, striking sparks from the stones. The boys pause, wait, and resume as if nearly being crushed is simply how innings work. And then there are the games of pure invention. Chalk marks on walls, bottle caps, buttons, bits of string, a wooden hoop pushed with a stick, a pile of dirt transformed into a fort. A broken crate becomes a ship, a throne, a counter, a jail, and then firewood depending on the hour. Children here do not lack imagination. They lack safe space, which is not at all the same thing. One offbeat detail survives from these streets. Children sometimes built tiny economies around discarded objects, trading cigar bands, marbles, bottle stoppers, scrap metal, and bits of coloured glass like serious merchants of treasure. A shiny button could become currency. A clean string could be valuable. A dead rat in some cities at certain times might even be worth a bounty if officials were trying to control pests. Imagine being 8 and learning that municipal policy has created a market opportunity. Charming, numb, educational. Unfortunately, yes. You turn into a narrower alley. The sun struggles to enter. Laundry hangs overhead, dripping lightly, and every drop seems aimed with personal malice. The ground is damp. The brick walls hold the night's chill. Children gather here too because they gather everywhere. Some play, some work, Some simply watch. A small boy sorts through refuse with a stick, searching for coal bits, rags, anything useful. His face is serious, not sad in a theatrical way, not arranged for pity, but focused. If he finds enough, someone at home may be pleased. If he does not, no one will be surprised. Poverty trains children to look downward, to notice what others throw away. Not everyone approves of what they see. Reformers worry about street children, about truancy, crime, disease, bad habits, bad language, and worse company. They are not entirely wrong. The streets are dangerous, but they are also social, educational, and in a rough way freeing. A child learns bargaining, speed, warning signs, accents, territories, adult moods, and how to vanish when needed. No classroom offers that curriculum, though one hopes most classrooms also do not include horse traffic. Experts continue to question whether street life damaged children, more by exposing them to danger or help them develop resilience in communities where formal support was weak. That question does not have a neat bedtime answer. The street could be cruel, could also be protective. Older children warned younger ones away from bullies. Neighbours watched from windows. Vendors gave scraps. A child known on the block was not entirely alone. School enters the day unevenly. Compulsory education laws existed in many states by this era, but enforcement varied and poor families often needed children's labour. Some children attend public school in crowded classrooms, where teachers try to turn dozens of restless bodies into future citizens. Others attend irregularly. Some never settle long enough to learn much beyond signature sums. And survival. You peek into a classroom through imagination's window. Rows of desks, chalk dust, stiff posture. A teacher with tired eyes and a voice trained to carry. Children repeat lessons in English, though some speak other languages at home. The school is a place of opportunity, yes, but also pressure. It asks children to become American in ways their parents may not fully understand. It offers reading and arithmetic, but it may also mock accents, names, lunches, clothes, and customs. Help can arrive wearing a very stern hat. Back outside, a group of girls skip rope, their chant rising and falling like a spell. Their boots slap the pavement, their skirts flick. For a moment, hardship loosens its grip. The rhythm is everything. Turn, jump, laugh, miss, start again. A little boy tries to join and is rejected with magnificent efficiency. He protests. They ignore him. Democracy has limits on the jump rope line. The sensory world around them is intense. A baker's warm smell drifts out and vanishes beneath coal smoke. Pickle brine sharpens the air. A wagon wheel grinds against stone. Someone empties a pail too near the curb. A baby cries. A dog barks. A ragman calls out for old clothes. Somewhere a fiddle practices a tune badly, then almost beautifully, then badly again. Children absorb all of it. Their bodies carry the neighbourhood into adulthood, the cough from bad air, the quick step from traffic, the guarded look from debt collectors, the jokes from stoops, the songs from home, the English picked up from playmates, the old language from grandparents, the memory of sleeping beside siblings in a room too hot to breathe. You notice how early they become useful. A child runs to buy onions. Another watches a baby. Another carries lunch to a father at work. Another translates for a mother at a shop counter. Another earns pennies after school. Their errands stitch the community together. Small feet move messages, food money, gossip, and warnings through the block. Yet they are still children. They quarrel over marbles, they boast, they sulk, they chase pigeons for no sensible reason. They make faces behind adults' backs. They dare one another to touch disgusting things. They invent secret clubs with rules no one remembers 10 minutes later. Their laughter rises against brick and soot, not because life is easy, but because laughter is stubborn. As afternoon leans closer, the children begin to scatter. Some return to rooms upstairs. Some head towards shops and factories. Some linger near alley mouths, reluctant to surrender the street. You watch them move between play and duty, between shouting and silence, between childhood and labour. And you understand that in these slums growing up is not a path. It is a crowded staircase, steep dim, and already waiting for the next pair of small shoes. Inside the tenements, the women are working too, holding together meals, wages, tempers, laundry, lodgers, sick beds, and the fragile order of rooms that always seem one crisis away from collapse. You climb back into the building as the children's voices fade behind you, and immediately the world narrows again. The stairwell swallows the street noise and replaces it with domestic thunder, pans striking iron stoves, babies fussing, water sloshing, needles tapping against thimbles, and women calling across landings with the sharp precision of people who cannot waste breath. Inside the rooms, women hold the day together. Not gently, not magically, not with some sentimental glow that would look sweet in a painting. They hold it together with sore backs, cracked hands, quick sums, shortened sleep, and a memory for every debt rent day. Fever, loose button, missing sock and child who claims he has absolutely washed his face when his ears are clearly carrying evidence against him. You stand in a kitchen that is also a sewing room, nursery, dining space, sick room, and emotional weather station. A woman moves from stove to table to cradle to wash-lined doorway without seeming to pause. Her skirt brushes a chair. Her hand turns a pot. Her eyes check the baby. Her voice corrects one child, encourages another, and answers a neighbour outside before the knock has fully landed. By 1900, many working-class women in American cities combined household labour with paid work, often taking in sewing, laundry, borders, or piecework to support family income. That fact matters because it breaks the tidy old picture of men earning and women simply keeping house. In the tenements, the home is often a workplace, and the woman at its centre is not resting inside it. She is employed by survival itself. Needles flash near the window. A daughter bends over a pile of fabric, finishing seams for a contractor who pays by the piece. The work looks delicate until you watch long enough to see the speed required. Fingers prick, shoulders tighten, eyes ache in poor light. The payment is small and the deadline is rude. The pile must shrink before evening, because tomorrow there may be another bundle. Or worse, no bundle at all. A younger child rocks the baby with one foot while trying to thread a needle. The baby objects to the arrangement. The child objects to the baby's objection. The mother says both names without looking up, and peace returns for approximately 12 seconds. It is not serene, it is command. Women's labour moves beyond the room too. Some go out to factories, shops, laundries, kitchens, or domestic service in wealthier homes. They rise early, prepare food for others, leave instructions, and step into streets where respectability is judged by strangers with far too much confidence. A woman earning wages may be admired, pitied, criticised, envied, or all of these before lunch. For immigrant women, the burden is doubled by the language, custom, and the complicated expectations of old and new worlds. A mother may keep Sabbath candles, saint cards, family recipes, mourning rituals, marriage traditions, or modesty codes, while her children return from school speaking English, slang, and questioning everything. That dinner table can become a border crossing with soup. You watch a woman bargain with a landlord's collector. Her face remains calm, but her fingers grip the edge of the table. The rent is short. A child has been sick. Work was thin last week. The collector has heard every story, which does not mean the stories are untrue. He taps his book. She offers part now, part Saturday. He sighs in the official language of small power. They settle on a promise, which is not safety, but it is little more time. Researchers still wrestle with whether women in slum districts gained more authority through their economic contributions or were trapped more deeply by endless unpaid labour. Both can be true in the same room. The woman who handles money, negotiates with vendors, manages lodgers, and organises family survival may command real respect. She may also be exhausted beyond poetry. Power here can arrive wearing an apron and carrying a headache. Now a neighbour comes in without ceremony. She borrows salt news and a little courage. Her husband has been laid off, or her child has a fever, or her sister has written from another city. The two women speak quickly in low tones. Advice passes between them: which doctor charges less, which grocer gives credit, which charity office asks too many questions, which factory foreman has wandering hands and should be avoided. This knowledge does not appear in official reports, but it keeps people alive. One unusual detail worth carrying with you is that some tenement women used windowsills, fire escapes, and rooftops as tiny household extensions, cooling food in winter, drying herbs, airing, bedding, even keeping a few plants or a caged bird where light could reach. The home pushed outward wherever it could. When rooms were too small, the building's edges became domestic territory. Not exactly a garden terrace, but please admire the effort. But the work of feeding everyone continues. A pot of soup stretches across the day, gathering whatever can be afforded. Bones, cabbage, onions, potatoes, beans, perhaps yesterday's broad. The smell is comforting, though thin. The woman tastes it, adds salt carefully, then decides it can survive another cup of water. Soup in a poor household is less a recipe than a negotiation. There is also the matter of appearance. Clothes must be brushed, patched, turned, and rescued. A coat can be altered for a younger child. A skirt can be remade. A shirt collar can be cleaned even when the shirt itself is tired of participating. Respectability matters because the outside world punishes visible poverty. A clean apron, polished shoes, smooth hair, or mended sieve can protect a person from insult-loss work or a teacher's scolding note. You see a girl stand while her mother pins a hem. The girl fidgets. The mother tells her to hold still. The girl says it scratches. The mother says life scratches. A pause follows. Then both laugh softly because the line is too accurate to resist. Borders bring another layer of labour. If a family takes in a single man, he may pay for a bed, a meal, laundry, or all three. His money helps, but his presence changes the household. More cooking, more washing, less privacy, more risk. Women must guard reputations as carefully as coins. A careless rumour can do damage, especially in communities where honour and respectability hold families together under public pressure. Pregnancy and childbirth are constant possibilities, sometimes welcomed, sometimes feared, often dangerous. Midwives, mothers, aunts, neighbours, and doctors all play roles depending on money, custom, and emergency. Babies arrive into rooms already full, bringing joy, worry, noise, and another mouth to feed. Infant care is tender but difficult when milk spoils, water is unsafe, and sleep is broken by heat, cold, and labour. You notice how little time belongs to any woman alone. Even grief must work around chores. If she is sad, the bread still needs buying. If she is ill, the baby still wakes. If she is angry, the rent remains due. Her body is expected to be useful no matter what private weather moves through it. Yet she is not merely a victim of the room. She is strategist, negotiator, caretaker, wage earner, cultural guardian, neighbourhood intelligence officer, and sometimes the only reason the family does not scatter. She knows which child lies badly and which lies beautifully. She knows when the coal is low without checking. She knows how long bread lasts if sliced thin. She knows who can be trusted with a key, a secret, or a dollar. Evening approaches and the room glows with stovelight. The children return louder than necessary. A man's steps sound in the hallway. The boarder coughs behind a curtain. The woman straightens, wipes her hands, and turns toward the next demand before the last one is finished. The day has leaned on her from every side, and still she adjusts its weight. You carry her image more forward. Sleeves rolled, hair pinned, eyes tired, hands moving. Outside, men will gather at hiring gates, docks, factories, and saloons, chasing wages, through a city that can use up strength without apology. You step back out into the street with the men, and the air feels different now, sharper somehow, edged with urgency. Morning has matured into that tense middle hour when opportunity might appear or might not, and everyone pretends they have some control over which it will be. Boots strike pavement with purpose, coats are pulled tighter, faces settle into expressions that say ready willing. Strong even when the truth underneath is tired, worried, and calculating. You follow them toward the hiring gates. These gates are not always literal iron bars, though. Sometimes they are. More often they are corners, docks, factory entrances, yards, places where men gather and wait to be chosen. It feels less like employment and more like selection. A foreman appears, eyes scan the crowd, hands are raised, voices call out, shoulders straighten, someone gets picked, someone else gets overlooked. It happens quickly without ceremony, as if human effort can be measured in a glance. At docks along the East River, labourers cluster early hoping for a day's work unloading cargo. Ships arrive heavy with goods and leave light, and every crate, barrel and sack must pass through human hands. Strong backs are valuable here, but strength alone is not enough. Timing connections, luck and a willingness to accept low pay all matter. A man who worked yesterday may not work today. A man who waits all morning may go home empty-handed, rehearsing explanations he does not want to give. By the turn of the 20th century, many urban labourers worked without steady contracts, relying on daily hiring systems that offered no guarantee of continued employment. That reality shapes everything. It makes saving difficult planning nearly impossible, and anxiety a constant companion. When wages are uncertain, every coin must stretch further than it should. You watch as a foreman selects a handful of men. They step forward quickly, grateful and guarded. The rest remain, trying not to show disappointment too clearly. Pride is a delicate thing when it stands in line for wages. A man shifts his weight, glances at another gate, considers walking there, calculates the time it would take, the chances of success, the risk of missing a call here. Decisions multiply like flies in summer. Factory work offers another path, though not necessarily a better one. You pass a textile mill where the windows hum with movement. Inside, machines clatter, belts spin, and the air carries lint that settles in the lungs. Hours are long, pay is low. Injuries are common. Still it is work, and work is what keeps the room upstairs from collapsing under its own needs. Sweatshops hide behind ordinary doors, a room above a shop, a backspace, a crowded floor where men and women bend over tables, cutting, stitching, pressing. The pace is relentless. The pay is by the piece. The faster you work, the more you earn, but the faster you work, the more your body protests. It is a bargain, no one wins completely. You notice how men speak to one another here. Short sentences, quick jokes, shared complaints. There is camaraderie, but it is cautious. Everyone is competing for the same limited chances. Friendship exists, but it must coexist with rivalry. A man may recommend a friend for a job one day and take his place the next. Survival does not always allow for consistency. A curious little detail surfaces as you listen. Some labourers carry tokens or tools that signal their trade: a hammer, a hook, a specific cap, anything that marks them as belonging to a certain type of work. It is a small way to stand out in a crowd where everyone is trying to look useful. Identity becomes portable, worn on the body like a badge. You follow a group of men into a saloon, not for leisure but for information. Saloons are more than places to drink. They are informal hiring halls, message centres and social hubs. A man might hear about a job, a strike, a foreman looking for hands, or a factory reducing its workforce. News travels through these rooms faster than any official notice. The air inside is thick with soak and conversation. A bartender wipes glasses with a cloth that has seen better days. Men lean against the counter, nursing drinks, slowly stretching them the way they stretch mumbles meals. Beer is cheap, and sometimes it comes with a free lunch, bread, cheese, maybe a slice of meat if the establishment is generous or strategic. Hunger and thirst often share the same table. Debate circles these spaces quietly among observers of the time. Some believed saloons trapped working men in cycles of vice and dependency. Others saw them as necessary refuges in a city that offered few comforts. The truth likely shifts depending on the man, the night, and the depth of his pockets. You watch a man count his coins before ordering. He hesitates, then chooses the smallest drink. Another man claps him on the back, offers to share. They laugh. The moment is light, but you sense the weight behind it. Generosity here is not casual. It is a calculated kindness extended with the hope it might be returned when needed. Outside again, the streets pulse with movement. Carts roll. Horses strain. Vendors call. The city does not pause for those who failed to find work this morning. It simply continues indifferent to individual outcomes. That indifference can feel like cruelty, but it is also the engine that keeps everything moving. You follow a man who did not get chosen. His steps are slower now, his shoulders slightly lower. He heads toward another district, another chance, another gate. He does not stop. Stopping would mean admitting defeat, and defeat is a luxury he cannot afford. At a construction site, men climb scaffolding, balancing on narrow planks high above the street. There are no harnesses, no helmets, no safety nets. The wind nudges them. The boards creak. A misstep could mean disaster. Yet they move with practiced ease because fear must be managed, not eliminated. You hear stories of strikes of workers banding together to demand better conditions, higher wages, shorter hours. Some succeed, many do not. Employers resist, police intervene. Tensions rise. The struggle for fairness plays out in streets and meeting halls in whispers and shouts. Back in the tenement, the absence or presence of a day's wage changes everything. A man returning with pay carries relief with him. A man returning without it carries silence. The room adjusts accordingly. Meals shrink or grow. Tempers tighten or loosen. Plans are made or postponed. You realize how closely tied identity is to work here. A man is often defined by what he does or what he hopes to do. Without work, he risks more than hunger. He risks losing his place in the social fabric, his sense of purpose, his standing within the family. As the day moves on, those who found work are deep in it now, lifting, carrying, stitching, hammering, sweating. Those still searching continue their rounds, scanning, asking, waiting. The city offers chances, but it does not distribute them evenly. You stand at the edge of a dock watching crates move from ship to shore. The water reflects the sky, grey and restless. A man wipes his brow, pauses for a moment, then lifts again. The rhythm of labour is steady, almost hypnotic. Lift, carry, set down, repeat. It is the pulse of the city beating through every street, every room, every life. And as afternoon leans toward evening, the men will begin to drift back, some with wages, some without, all carrying the weight of the day into spaces already full. Behind closed doors, needles will still move, children will still chatter, and the quiet hum of work will continue long after the streetlights flicker on. Behind one ordinary door, the city changes its voice. Outside carts rattle, vendors bargain, children shout, and the street keeps up its restless performance. Inside, the sound becomes sharper and smaller needles. Through cloth scissors, biting fabric treadles, pumping irons, hissing, thread snapping, a cough caught in the throat and swallowed. You step into a garment room and the air seems to tighten around you. This is not a grand factory floor with tall windows and neat rows. It is a crowded workroom tucked above a shop or inside a tenement flat where the boundary between home and industry has almost disappeared. Coats hang from pegs, bundles of cloth pile on chairs, finished pieces wait in stacks. A pot simmers somewhere because people still need to eat even while work tries to occupy every surface. The light is poor. The room leans toward the windows, hungry for brightness. Those nearest the glass have the advantage, though. Advantage is a generous word when everyone is bent forward, shoulders rounded, eyes narrowed. Needles flash, fingers move quickly. Nobody wastes motion. Wasted motion is wasted money, and money is already behaving like a shy animal. Around 1900, the American garment industry relied heavily on immigrant labour, including thousands of Jewish and Italian workers in New York's crowded clothing trades. That is one of the solid facts underneath the dust and thread. Much of the work is divided into tiny tasks: cutting, basting, finishing, pressing button, sewing, sleeve, setting, seam, closing. A coat or shirtwaist may pass through many hands before it reaches a shop window, clean pressed and innocent looking, as if it has never known this room. You sit beside a worker, though sitting is not quite restful here. The chair is hard, the table is crowded, cloth scratches your wrist. The worker beside you pulls fabric close and stitches with a speed that makes your modern fingers feel unemployed. The payment comes by the piece, so time becomes a visible thing. Each garment carries a few cents of hope, each mistake steals from the day. The contractor arrives with bundles, counts them, gives instructions and leaves behind pressure. He may be part of a system between manufacturer and worker, an in-between man who takes his cut before wages reach the people doing the sewing. Everyone knows this. Knowing does not make the rent cheaper. You hear the foot-powered sewing machine thump and whir. Its rhythm fills the room like a second heartbeat. The operator pumps the treadle steadily, guiding cloth beneath the needle back straight for a moment, then bent again. The machine is a marvel and a tyrant. It speeds work, yes, but speed often means the expected output rises too. Progress once again arrives carrying a bill. Dust floats in the light. Not romantic dust. Cloth dust, lint hair, coal soot, and the powdery residue of work done too long in too little air. It settles on eyelashes, lips, cuffs. It enters lungs. A cough passes from one corner to another. Someone opens a window. Someone else complains about the draft. Both are right. Commentators have long disagreed over whether sweatshops were primarily engines of exploitation or stepping stones into economic stability for some immigrant families. The answer is uncomfortable because both possibilities can share the same table. A worker might be underpaid, overworked, and still earning the crucial pennies that keep a child in school or a family from eviction. Exploitation does not stop being exploitation because people are resourceful inside it. A girl carries finished pieces to another room. She is quick, careful, and too young to look as serious as she does. Her hair is pinned badly, strands falling loose around her face. She has been told not to drag the cloth. She does not drag it. Children learn quality control early when ruined work means lost pay. In the corner, a woman presses seams with a heavy iron heated on the stove. She lifts it with both strength and caution. Too cool and the seam will not set. Too hot and the fabric scorches. The iron smells faintly metallic with a bitter hint of singed cloth. Her arm repeats the motion until it becomes almost mechanical lift press, slide, lift, return. You feel tired just watching. She is beyond tired and still moving. Here is an odd little detail. For the soft hours of the night, some workers kept bits of wax near their sewing to strengthen thread and make it pass through fabric more smoothly. A small lump of wax could save time, reduce tangles, and spare nerves. It is not glamorous, but in this room a thread that behaves itself is practically a colleague with the manners. The garments being made are not necessarily for people like the makers. That irony sits quietly in every stitch. A shirtwaist might be destined for a department store customer who will admire the fit without imagining the bent backs behind it. A coat may warm someone who never climbs these stairs. A child's garment may be sewn by a child who cannot afford one like it. Commerce has always been excellent at hiding fingerprints. The room grows warmer as the day deepens. Bodies, stove iron, lamp machines all add heat. In winter, this is almost welcome until the air becomes stale. In summer, it is punishment. Sweat dampens collars. Cloth sticks to skin. A worker wipes her forehead with the back of her hand and leaves a grey streak behind. No one comments. Everyone has their own streaks. Talk rises when work allows it. A joke in Yiddish, a complaint in Italian, a warning in English, a song half-hummed then abandoned when concentration tightens. The languages overlap without fully blending like fabrics laid one over another. The room is multilingual because wages do not wait for perfect grammar. A young man at the table speaks of unions. Someone tells him to lower his voice. Someone else says the union will not pay the rent if the boss stops sending work. Another says, without organisation nothing changes. The needlework continues while the argument breathes between stitches. It is possible to debate the future while finishing a cuff. In fact, it may be necessary. You think of the women upstairs keeping households alive, the men at hiring gates, the children in alleys, and now these workers folded into the garment trade. The slum is not only a place people live, it is a place where the city hides labour. Finished goods travel outward, while fatigue remains behind. Every now and then an inspector may appear depending on city laws, enforcement, corruption and timing. Some workrooms fear inspections, others simply adapt. A bed becomes evidence of family residence. A pile of cloth disappears under a blanket. A child becomes a visiting cousin with remarkably steady hands. Regulation enters and survival answers with improvisation. Yet danger lingers. Crowded rooms burn easily. Lamps tip. Fabric catches. Exits are blocked by the goods furniture bodies. You can feel the risk without seeing flames. It waits in the clutter in the narrow hall in the locked or obstructed path to the stairs. Later disasters will make the nation look harder at garment work, but for now, Lundidra is a daily mixed with Oswaldstein. Eman Lint. As evening approaches, the pace does not soften. The pile must be completed. The contractor may come, the rent may be due, a child may need medicine. A worker's eyes blur, then clear, then blur again. Fingers continue because fingers must. The needle rises and falls like a tiny metronome measuring necessity. At last one bundle is tied. Finished pieces are stacked, counted, checked. The room exhales, but only slightly. Tomorrow there will be more if the family is fortunate. That is the strange cruelty of this system. No work means fear too much, work means exhaustion, and just enough work is as rare as a quiet street. You step back towards the door, carrying the sound with you treadle needle scissors, cough thread. Behind you the workers remain bent over cloth in the dim light, sewing the city's respectability one seam at a time. Outside evening gathers around saloons, missions, music halls, church basements, and every small escape people can find before sleep claims what is left of them. Evening settles over the block, not like peace exactly, but like a blanket with holes in it. The day's work has not ended for everyone. Needles still move in upstairs rooms, babies still fuss, stoves still smoke. A woman still counts coins twice, hoping the second count will be kinder. But outside the city begins to change its tempo. The hard rush of labour softens into a restless search for relief. You step into the street and follow the glow. Gas lamps tremble in the damp air. Shop windows throw weak rectangles of light onto the pavement. Men drift towards saloons, women pause at stoops. Children resist being called indoors, and old people sit near open doors as if they are guarding the memories of several countries at once. The block smells of beer onions, cigar smoke, wet stone, fried fish and humanity at the end of a long day. The saloon is one of the brightest rooms on the street. Its door opens and closes with a wooden sigh. Inside, men lean at the bar, shoulders loosening, faces warming under lamplight. The floor is gritty. The mirror behind the counter is smoky and grander than the room deserves. Glasses clink. Coins tap wood. A bartender listens, judges, pause, and pretends not to hear anything too dangerous. At the turn of the 20th century, saloons often served as social centres in working-class neighbourhoods, offering cheap drink food, political contacts, credit, and news. They were not only drinking places, they were message boards with beer. A man might find out who is hiring which ward leader is distributing help, whose cousin needs a room, or which factory has cut wages again. You stand near the back where the smoke thickens. A free lunch sits under watchful eyes, bread, cheese, maybe pickles, sometimes soup or meat scraps if the saloon keeper wants loyal customers. Of course, free means you buy a drink because generosity also has bookkeeping. Still, for a hungry labourer, this little spread can matter. A slice of bread, a bite of cheese, a glass of beer, and suddenly the evening feels less sharp. There is laughter here and boasting. A dock worker tells a story that improves with each telling. A tailor complains that his machine has more personality than his boss. Someone mentions politics and half the room groans, while the other half becomes intensely alive. A man at the end of the bar sings 2 lines of a song, forgets the third, and replaces it with confidence. Nobody minds much. Yet the saloon also carries risk. Wages can vanish here. Tempers can rise. A lonely man can become lonelier after his 3rd glass. Reformers look at the saloon and see corruption, temptation, broken families, and political machines fattened by alcohol. They are not inventing all of that. But from inside the room you also see warmth male friendship information. and a place where a worker is called by name instead of by number or task. Writers of the period often quarrelled over whether the saloon was a neighbourhood poison or a poor man's clubhouse. Neither phrase is quite enough. It depends on the saloon, the keeper, the customer, the hour, the debt, the marriage, the thirst, the grief, and whether anyone has eaten enough that day. History rarely behaves politely for moral slogans. You leave the saloon and cross toward a mission hall. The mood changes at once. The doorway is plainer, the light cooler, the air less smoky. Inside, benches line the room. A hymn begins thin at first, then fuller as voices join. Some have come for prayer, some have come for warmth, some for a meal, some for a lecture they will endure because coffee may follow. People are practical creatures, even when being saved. Missions and religious charities are common in poor districts. Protestant groups, Catholic parishes, Jewish aid societies, settlement workers, and ethnic mutual aid associations all offer different kinds of help. Soup clothing, moral instruction classes, employment leads, temporary shelter, medical visits, and sometimes judgment wrapped in kindness. Assistance often comes with expectations. Bathe, pray work. Reform, assimilate. Stop drinking, learn English. Be grateful, do not be too visibly poor while asking for help. Simple program, naturally. Only your entire life required. You sit near the back as a speaker talks about uplift. The word floats in the room like a balloon tied to a brick. Uplift can mean real help. It can also mean someone better fed explaining your failures to you. The listeners know the difference. They nod when useful. They drift when not. They accept bread when offered. Dignity sometimes means receiving what you need without letting the giver own your soul. Not all escapes are solemn. Farther along, music leaks from a dance hall. The fiddle is lively, the piano slightly out of tune, and the floorboards complain beneath quick feet. Young people gather where they can, hungry for movement, flirtation, laughter, and the thrilling possibility of not being watched by every aunt, priest, mother, rabbi, neighbour and cousin in a 3-block radius. You see a young woman smooth her skirt before stepping inside. She has worked all day, but her eyes brighten at the music. A young man tries to look casual and fails in a way that is almost touching. They dance in a room that smells of sweat, perfume dust and hot lamps. The city outside is hard. Inside, for a few minutes, bodies move because they want to, not because a foreman demands it. One strange little social detail, penny arcades and cheap amusements let people see moving pictures, strength machines, fortune-telling, cards, peeped shows and mechanical novelties for a coin or two. A worker could spend a few cents and glimpse comedy melodrama, exotic thought scenes or pure nonsense flickering before the eyes. Imagine escaping a tenement room by watching a blurry film of a train, then returning to a building where the stairs are still waiting like unpaid bills. On stoops, older women hold another kind of evening court. They'd sit with shawls around their shoulders, speaking in low voices, scanning the block with magnificent accuracy. They know who is courting whom, who is behind on rent, who has been seen near which saloon, which child lies, which child steals, and which mother needs help but will not ask. The stoop is a surveillance system powered by memory and tea. Children chase the last of the light. Their games grow wilder as bedtime approaches because children everywhere treat sleep as a personal insult. A mother calls from a window. No response. She calls again, sharper. A small body appears from behind a cart, suddenly innocent. The performance is ancient. You pause near a church basement where a charity supper is beginning. Bowls pass down a line. The soup is thin but warm. Bread is handed out. A man removes his cap before eating. A woman wraps half her portion in cloth for someone upstairs. Even in need, people redistribute. The poor are often accused of dependency by those who have never watched a hungry person save food for another hungry person. As night deepens, the refuges begin to empty. The saloon remains loud. The mission dims. The dance hall pulses a little longer. Stoop gossip dissolves into doorways. The street grows darker but not silent. Someone laughs in the wrong key. Someone weeps behind a curtain. Someone hums a hymn badly remembered. Someone counts coins from the day and wonders how many days are left in the week. You feel how necessary these escapes are. Not because they solve poverty, they do not. A beer does not fix rent. A hymn does not clean air shafts. A dance does not raise wages. But relief is not nothing. A human being cannot live only on endurance. There must be some corner of the day where the spirit sits down, takes off its boots and says very quietly, "I am still here." And as the night folds itself around the block, coughs begin to rise again from stairwells and rooms. Relief gives way to breath fever, bad air, and the anxious knowledge that illness travels easily where people live too close together. The night does not bring quiet so much as it brings listening. You return to the stairwell and the building seems to breathe in a different rhythm now. Slower, heavier, punctuated by sounds that do not belong to the cheerful parts of life. A cough echoes from one floor, then another answers it. A child whimpers in sleep. A chair scrapes as someone rises to check on a fever. Somewhere water is poured into a basin, and the soft splash feels louder than it should. Illness lives here as comfortably as any tenant. You step into a room where a lamp burns low, its flame turned down to save oil. The air feels thick, almost warm in the wrong way. A child lies on a narrow bed, cheeks, flushed hair, damp against the forehead. A mother presses a cloth to the child's skin, lifting it, dipping it, replacing it again with quiet urgency. Her movements are practiced, but her eyes betray the truth. Practice does not remove for fear. At the beginning of the 20th century, infectious diseases like tuberculosis, diphtheria, measles, and influenza spread rapidly in overcrowded tenement housing, where ventilation was poor and families lived in close quarters. That reality hangs over the room like a shadow that never quite leaves. People know the names of these illnesses. They have seen what they do. Some have buried children because of them. The cough you heard in the hallway returns in your memory sharper now. Tuberculosis, often called consumption, moves slowly but relentlessly wearing down the body over time. It thrives in conditions like these where fresh air is scarce and rest is a luxury. The phrase itself sounds almost gentle. The disease is not. You notice how the room rearranges itself around sickness. A bed becomes a sick bed. A chair becomes a nurse's station. A table holds bottles, cloths, spoons, remedies, both trusted and doubtful. Work does not stop, but it bends around the patient. A woman sews with one hand while rocking a cradle with the other. A child is told to be quiet, then reminded again, then reminded with more force. Doctors exist, of course, but access is uneven. A visit costs money. Some families hesitate until they cannot hesitate any longer. Charity clinics and visiting nurses try to fill the gap, bringing care into homes that need it. Their presence is both relief and reminder. Relief that help has arrived. Reminder that help is needed at all. You follow a nurse as she climbs the stairs, her bag in hand. She moves with purpose, accustomed to narrow steps and crowded landings. Inside the room, she checks the child's pulse, listens to breathing, asks questions in a calm voice that steadies the air. Her instructions are clear: fresh air if possible, clean linens, light food, rest. The family nods, absorbing each word, knowing how difficult each instruction may be to follow. Fresh air is a challenge when windows open onto narrow shafts. Clean linens require water, time and space to dry. Rest is complicated when work demands attention. Still they will try. Effort is not optional here. There is a quiet conversation among those who study these conditions. Some suggest that improved sanitation and housing reforms played the largest role in reducing disease. Others point to medical advances, better nutrition and public health campaigns. The truth is layered. Change rarely comes from a single direction. It arrives in pieces, sometimes too slowly for those who need it most. You notice small rituals of care. A spoonful of broth offered gently, a blanket tucked just so, a lullaby hummed under the breath. These acts do not cure illness, but they hold it at bay if only for a moment. They remind the patient that they are not alone. In another room, a man sits with a handkerchief pressed to his mouth, his shoulders shaking with a cough he cannot suppress. He turns away, trying to contain it, as if politeness might limit the spread of sickness. His wife watches, her expression tight, calculating what this means. Lost work, lost wages, rising fear. Children sense the tension even when words are soft. They play more quietly or not at all. They watch adults for cues, learning how to respond to something they do not fully understand. Illness becomes part of their education, as real as any lesson in school. You step into the hallway again, and the building feels like a network of fragile threads. Each room holds its own struggles, but they are connected by walls that do little to stop sound or air. A sneeze, a cough, a fever all can travel, finding new hosts in the crowded space. Public health efforts begin to make their way into these neighbourhoods. Inspectors check conditions. Posters appear advising cleanliness, ventilation, isolation of the sick. Some families follow these guidelines closely, others struggle to do so. Compliance is easier when resources are available. When they are not, advice can feel like a distant echo. You pass a window where a sign hangs warning of illness and inside. It is a signal to neighbours, a request for caution. It is also a mark, a public acknowledgement that something is wrong. The family inside lives with both the need for help and the fear of stigma. Illness can isolate as much as it infects. There is an unusual detail that surfaces in these conditions. Some families turn to home remedies passed down through generations, mixtures of herbs, teas, poultices, and practices that blend tradition with necessity. Whether they worked or not, they offered a sense of action, a way to respond when formal medicine was out of reach. You notice how time changes in a sick room. Minutes stretch, hours blur, night feels longer. The usual markers of the day fade, replaced by the rhythm of breathing, the rise and fall of fever, the hope for improvement. A mother counts breaths. A father watches the clock. A child sleeps, wakes, sleeps again. Outside the city continues its restless motion. Inside the focus narrows to one body, one struggle, one hope. The contrast is stark. Life does not pause for illness, but illness demands attention all the same. As the night deepens, some patients improve, fever breaks, breathing eases, relief spreads through the room like a quiet dawn. Others do not. Their condition worsens and the room grows heavier with the weight of uncertainty. You step back feeling the presence of something that cannot be ignored. Disease is not just a medical issue here. It is a social one shaped by housing, work, diet, and access to care. It reveals the vulnerabilities of the community, the places where the fabric is thin. The building settles into a restless sleep. Coughs continue softer now, or perhaps your ears have adjusted. The lamp burns low, the mother still watches. The nurse has moved on to another room, another patient, another set of instructions that may or may not be followed. Morning will come again, bringing with it the same challenges, the same routines, the same fight for balance. But for now, the night holds its breath, waiting to see who will greet the next day with strength and who will need to gather what little they have left to try again. Morning brings the police whistle before it brings much comfort. You hear it cut through the street, thin and sharp, bouncing between brick walls and window glass. A few heads appear above you. A curtain shifts. A child freezes with one foot in the gutter, suddenly interested in becoming invisible. Somewhere a woman calls someone back indoors, not because she knows what has happened, but because experience has taught her that distance from trouble is a sensible family policy. You follow the sound toward the corner. A patrolman stands near a pushcart, one hand resting on his club, the other lifted in a gesture meant to calm everyone and impress everyone at the same time. Two men argue beside him. One says the other cheated him. The other says the first man is a liar, which is not the sort of clarification that improves the atmosphere. The crowd leans in not too close, because curiosity is free but bruises are expensive. Police presence in crowded American city districts around 1900 was shaped by foot patrols, local political influence, informal payments, and the practical need to manage disorder in neighborhoods where poverty and density created constant friction. That is the solid ground beneath this little street drama. The law is not an abstract marble statue here. It is a man in boots who knows some names, forgets others, and may or may not accept a favour with the correct expression of surprise. The patrolman listens, he speaks, he separates the men. Nobody seems fully satisfied, which means the compromise is probably complete. The crowd begins to thin, though not before several witnesses provide opinions nobody requested. This is one of the city's oldest forms of entertainment. You walk with the patrolman for a block. His beat is a map of small conflicts, a drunken man asleep in a doorway, boys throwing stones at a sign, a shopkeeper complaining about theft, a woman reporting that her husband has not returned, a landlord's agent wanting assistance with a difficult tenant. Each problem arrives wearing a human face and carrying its own history. Some officers help, some threaten, some look away, some know that a neighbourhood survives through arrangements that do not appear in law books. A grocer lets a widow buy on credit. A saloon keeper passes messages for a ward boss. A gang leader keeps one kind of thief away while introducing another kind of fear. The patrolman moves through this web, part guardian, part negotiator, part watcher, part instrument of power. Commentators still disagree over whether police in slum districts mainly protected vulnerable residents or enforced the priorities of property owners and political machines. The evidence does not sit neatly on either side. A woman might need the police when violence enters her room. A vendor might fear the police when his cart violates a rule he cannot afford to obey. A boy might run from an officer today and call for one tomorrow. Life here has no patience for clean categories. At the end of the block, a group of young men gathers near a cellar entrance. They are not all gang members, though to outsiders they may look like a single threatening shape. Some are unemployed, some are waiting for friends, some are watching territory, some are simply performing toughness because softness has poor survival value on the street. One of them wears his cap at a precise angle, another has a scar near his eyebrow, a third laughs too loudly. They notice you noticing them. The air changes slightly. Not danger exactly, but possibility. In neighbourhoods like this, reputation is a currency. A man who can make others step aside has something useful, even if it's not respectable. Street gangs existed in many urban slum districts, and they were not always the theatrical monsters later movies would adore. They could be groups of neighbourhood youths, ethnic clubs, political enforcers, thieves, brawlers, or informal protectors, depending on place and moment. The line between gang social club and political muscle could blur until even the members might disagree after 2 beers. One odd detail worth slipping into your pocket: some gangs and local toughs took names that sounded almost comically grand, borrowing from animals, neighbourhoods, national identities, or heroic imagery. A group of underfed young men in battered shoes might give themselves a name fit for a medieval army. It is ridiculous, yes, but also understandable. If the world gives you little power, naming yourself something fierce is at least a start. You pass a pool room where cigarette smoke curls out the door. Inside, boys and men lean over tables watching balls click softly. Gambling moves quietly in corners. A coin changes hands. Someone smiles without warmth. Rooms like this attract suspicion because they gather young men away from family supervision work discipline and reformers with pamphlets. Naturally, the young men find this one of the room's better qualities. Protection is complicated. A local gang might extort shopkeepers demanding payment to prevent broken windows, stolen goods, or worse. This is not subtle economics. Pay and trouble passes by. Refuse and trouble discovers your address. Yet the same neighbourhood toughs might also defend residents from outsiders, settle disputes, or help a family in crisis. This does not make them noble, it makes them embedded. You hear a story from a vendor who has paid a few coins to the same group for months. He resents it. He also admits nobody else has bothered him since. He shrugs, which in this city can mean defeat practicality, or a philosophy too tired for words. Politics is never far away. Ward bosses use neighbourhood connections to gather votes, distribute favours, and keep loyalty moving. A club room might offer coal in winter, help with a court case, a recommendation for work, or assistance after a death. In return, it expects gratitude at election time. Police gangs, saloons, and political machines often overlap in ways that make reformers grind their teeth and residents calculate their options. You enter a political clubhouse just briefly. Men sit around tables, talking beneath portraits and smoke-stained walls. A list of names rests near the door. Someone knows who needs a job, who has a cousin in trouble, who can deliver voters, who owes money. There is corruption here, certainly. There is also service. That is the irritating thing about machines. They often work, at least for some people, in places where official systems feel distant or hostile. A woman arrives asking for help with a son arrested after a fight. The man behind the desk listens not as a saint but as someone measuring loyalty, usefulness, and neighborhood feeling. He says he will see what can be done. She thanks him. She hates needing him. Both emotions fit. Outside, a patrol wagon rattles past. Children chase it for half a block until an adult shouts. Their curiosity is not innocence. They know arrests happen. They know jail is not a storybook place. They know names of boys who went in and came out changed or did not come back for a long time. The slum teaches everyone to read danger in small signs. A sudden quiet at the corner. A policeman walking too fast. A group of men spreading apart. A shop door closing early. A mother calling children upstairs before dusk. These signals pass through the neighborhood faster than print. Yet daily life continues around threat. Bread is bought, laundry is hung, babies are bounced, men flirt badly, women bargain fiercely, boys boast, girls roll their eyes with imaginative skill. Fear does not cancel routine, it threads through it. As evening nears, the patrolman moves on, the young men drift toward another corner, and the political clubhouse fills with warmer light. You feel how safety here is not a simple promise made by law. It is negotiated through neighbours, officers, relatives, toughs, bosses, vendors, churches, and instincts sharpened by experience. You turn back towards the tenements, hearing languages rise from stoops and windows, each carrying a different past into the same narrow streets. The next layer of the neighbourhood is not only danger or protection, but identity itself spoken in accents, prayers, recipes, songs and names that America is still learning how to hear. You follow the voices. They rise from stoops, windows, shop fronts, basements, courtyards and narrow kitchens where steam clouds the glass. They overlap in the street like threads in a worn but stubborn piece of cloth. English is here, of course, but not always first and not always comfortably worn. You hear Yiddish bending around jokes and prayers, Italian rolling warmly through argument, Irish voices sharp with rhythm, German in shop signs, Polish in doorways, Chinese dialects in laundry rooms and restaurants, Greek, Arabic, Russian, and many others passing in fragments, each carrying a homeland inside the mouth. The slum is not one people. It is many people living too close together, and somehow still managing to create boundaries, friendships, suspicions, routines, and entire worlds within a few blocks. You stand near a bakery window where the smell of bread spills into the street. A Jewish woman in a dark shawl speaks to the baker in Yiddish, then turns and answers a child in English. The child replies in that swift hybrid language born on immigrant streets, half home, half schoolyard, entirely alive. Nearby Italian boys tease one another while their mother bargains over tomatoes. Across the way, an Irish labourer greets a German shopkeeper with the kind of nod that suggests long-practiced mutual caution and no interest in unnecessary conversation before breakfast. By 1900, millions of immigrants had entered the United States through ports like New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and San Francisco, reshaping urban neighborhoods with dense ethnic enclaves built around language, work, religion, and mutual aid. That fact does not sit in a textbook here. It walks beside you wearing patched boots, carrying a basket and asking if the fish is fresh. In these streets, newcomers often cluster near those who speak the same language or come from the same region. This is not only nostalgia, it is practical survival. If you cannot read English, you need someone who can translate a lease, a wage agreement, A warning from school, a court notice, or a doctor's instruction. If you need work, you ask the people who know where your cousin's neighbour found a place. If you need credit, you go to the grocer who understands your name before he learned your history. A storefront synagogue occupies one floor above a shop. A Catholic parish anchors another street its bell, calling families who have crossed an ocean but not surrendered their saints. A Chinese association hall offers connection in a city that often treats Chinese residents with open hostility. Mutual aid societies collect dues, support funerals, help the sick, assist widows, arrange loans, and remind members that poverty is easier to face when it has witnesses. Observers have disagreed for generations over whether immigrant enclaves slowed assimilation or made it possible by giving newcomers a stable base from which to face American life. Standing here, the question feels less like a debate and more like a staircase. People climb at different speeds. Some hold tight to old customs. Some rush toward English factory wages, public school, and new clothes. Most do both awkwardly depending on the hour. You walk past a tailor's sign written in 2 languages. The letters lean proudly across the window. Inside, a man measures cloth while his wife speaks to a customer from the old country. Their son, perhaps 12, corrects their English pronunciation with the merciless confidence of a child who has recently learned 3 school words and now believes himself a diplomat. His mother snaps at him. His father hides a smile. Generational tension flickers everywhere. Parents worry that children are becoming too American, which can mean independent, disrespectful, ambitious, careless with religion, fond of slang, or simply unwilling to wear the old boots. Children worry that parents are too foreign, too cautious, too strict, too loud, too embarrassing at school meetings. Both sides are partly right, which is why dinner can become such a lively diplomatic conference. Food marks identity more gently than politics does. The street smells like a map. Garlic rye bread, pickled herring, tomato sauce, cabbage tea, coffee, frying onions, ginger sausages, beans and cheap fish all drift together. A neighbour may complain about another family's cooking smell while secretly wondering why it makes the hallway so interesting. Every pot upstairs tells a story of what was remembered, what was affordable, and what had to be changed, because America had different markets. There is a small odd detail in the language of the streets. Children often become family interpreters handling adult matters far beyond their years. A little girl may translate for her mother at a clinic. A boy may read a letter from a landlord. A teenager may explain a labour notice to a father whose hands can build, lift and mend, but whose English still stumbles. This gives children power, and sometimes burdens them with worry they should not have to carry. You pause outside a Chinese laundry. Steam fogs the window. Shirts hang in crisp rows, cleaner than the street that delivered them. Chinese immigrants in many American cities faced legal exclusion, discrimination, violence, and limited job opportunities, and laundries became one of the few businesses available to many men shut out of other trades. Inside, the work is hot, repetitive, and skilled. Outside, passers-by may treat the workers as strangers even after years in the neighbourhood. A black family passes along the block, part of the urban communities that existed long before the larger Great Migration would transform northern cities. Their experience of poverty overlaps with immigrants in some ways and differs sharply in others, shaped by racism in housing, work, policing, and public life. They know that America's promises are not distributed evenly, no matter how loudly the country praises itself, a familiar national habit, unfortunately. You hear music now, a fiddle from one room, a hymn from another, a street singer carrying a tune in a language you cannot identify. Music softens borders for a moment. People may not understand the words, but they understand longing, celebration, mourning, flirtation, and the ancient human need to make noise beautifully after a difficult day. Not every encounter is warm. Ethnic rivalries can be fierce, jobs are scarce, rents are high, and politicians are skilled at turning group against group when it serves them. Older immigrant communities sometimes resent newer arrivals. Religious suspicion lingers. Racial prejudice cuts hard lines. A slur muttered at a market stall can start a fight. A rumour can move faster than a horse cart. In crowded places, difference is both familiar and combustible. Still, cooperation grows in small, repeated ways. A neighbour lends a pot. A midwife crosses a language barrier because babies do not wait for translation. A shopkeeper extends credit. Children from different backgrounds play together until adults teach them caution. Women compare prices without sharing a language, fully using gestures, numbers. And the universal expression for that is too expensive, try again. You enter a tenement room where a family gathers around a letter from overseas. The paper is thin folded many times, touched carefully. Someone reads aloud. The room quiets. News from home arrives months old but emotionally fresh. A marriage, a death, a harvest, a war scare, a request for money, a blessing. The past has crossed the Atlantic in an envelope. For some, America is temporary. They plan to earn, save and return. For others, return becomes impossible, then unlikely, then a story told to children who will never see the village except in dreams. The slum holds that in between feeling the ache of arrival without belonging, departure without leaving. As dusk returns, the street glows with shop signs and kitchen light. Languages soften into evening conversation. A mother calls a child by a name that will be shortened at school tomorrow. A father folds a newspaper he can only partly read. A grandmother murmurs a prayer from another continent. You understand that the slum is not just poor housing, it is a crowded workshop of identity, where America is being made badly, beautifully, noisily, one accent at a time. And just beyond the voices, reformers are gathering notebooks, teachers are preparing lessons, settlement workers are opening doors, and the next question waits quietly. Who gets to help and who gets to decide what help should look like? You drift toward a building that feels slightly different from the rest. The doorway is open wider. The windows are cleaner. There is a notice posted outside in careful English and then again in another language beneath it. Inside, the air carries the smell of book soap and something like intention. This is a settlement house, one of several, that have begun to appear in crowded neighbourhoods like this. Places where reformers attempt to bridge the gap between poverty and opportunity. You step inside and the noise changes. It is not silent. Children laugh somewhere down the hall. A piano practices a hesitant scale. Voices rise in instruction rather than argument. The walls hold maps, charts, notices and schedules that try to impose order on lives that rarely obey schedules. A woman in a plain dress greets you with a tired but sincere smile, the kind worn by someone who has chosen to be here, fully aware of how much work that choice requires. By the early 20th century, settlement houses such as Hull House in Chicago and similar institutions in New York and other cities provided education, childcare, cultural programs and social services to immigrant communities. That is the simple foundation beneath what you're seeing now, but like everything here, the details matter more than the summary. You move into a classroom where children sit at wooden desks, their feet barely touching the floor. A teacher writes on a chalkboard as forming letters slowly, carefully, as if shaping something fragile. The children repeat the sounds. Some stumble, some race ahead. A few stare out the window, distracted by the street's ongoing drama. English lessons are central here. Language opens doors to jobs, to schools, to official documents that otherwise remain locked. But language also reshapes identity. A child who learns English quickly may gain confidence outside the home while drifting from the language of parents and grandparents. You can feel the tension in the room even if no one names it aloud. In another space, women gather around a table learning skills that might bring income or improve daily life. Sewing, cooking, hygiene. Childcare, all taught with a mixture of patience and quiet judgment. The instructor demonstrates a technique. The women follow, some with ease, others with skepticism. They already know how to run a household under pressure. What they're being offered here is a different set of tools shaped by middle-class ideas of order and efficiency. There is a discussion that has echoed through time about places like this. Some praise them as essential supports that offered education, health services, and community in neighbourhoods that lacked all three. Others point out that they often carried assumptions about how poor people should live, sometimes dismissing cultural traditions in favour of a single vision of progress. Both perspectives find evidence within these walls. You notice a small library in the corner. Shelves hold books in multiple languages, though English dominates. A young man sits with a volume open, tracing lines with his finger sounding out words under his breath. Reading here is not leisure. It is advancement, a step towards something that feels both close and distant at once. Down the hall, a childcare room hums with activity. Babies lie in cradles. Toddlers stack blocks. A caregiver moves among them, lifting soothing redirecting. For mothers who must work this space offers a rare kind of relief. Not perfect, not always available, but meaningful. A few hours where a child is watched, fed, kept safe, allowing a parent to earn or rest. There is an interesting little detail tucked into the daily routine. Some settlement houses offered classes in music, art or theatre, not because these were practical in the narrow sense, but because they believed exposure to culture could uplift the spirit. Imagine learning to play a violin in a building, surrounded by coal smoke and crowded alleys. Might seem out of place. But it also suggests that beauty is not reserved for the wealthy. You step into a lecture room where a speaker addresses a small crowd. The topic is public health. Clean water, proper waste disposal, ventilation, the importance of fresh air. The audience listens, some nodding, others folding their arms. Advice is easier to give than to follow, when your home has one window and your water comes from a shared tap. A nurse stands nearby, ready to answer questions. She speaks gently, explaining symptom remedies, when to seek help. Her presence bridges the gap between formal medicine and everyday life. She does not simply treat illness. She teaches prevention, though prevention often requires conditions that are not easily met. You notice how the settlement house tries to create a sense of order. Schedules posted on walls, classes at set times, rules about cleanliness, attendance, behaviour. It is an attempt to introduce structure into lives shaped by unpredictability. For some, this structure is welcome. For others, it feels imposed another set of expectations layered onto already heavy days. Outside the street continues its own lessons. Children learn to dodge carts. Men learn to read a foreman's mood. Women learn to stretch food. The settlement house offers an alternative curriculum, one that promises improvement but does not always account for the realities waiting just beyond its doors. You speak with a young woman who attends evening classes. She works during the day, studies at night. Her eyes are tired but bright. She talks about becoming a teacher, about helping others learn. Her ambition feels both fragile and fierce. The path ahead is uncertain, but the possibility exists, and that is enough to keep her moving. There is a quiet conversation among observers about whether these institutions truly changed the trajectory of slum life or simply eased its edges without addressing deeper causes. The answer, as usual, is complex. They helped individuals, they influenced policy, they also operated within a system that produced poverty in the first place. You leave the building and step back into the street. The contrast is immediate. Noise returns, smells intensify, the air feels heavier. Yet you carry something with you, a sense that within this crowded environment there are pockets of effort aimed at change, however imperfect. As evening settles again, you see children leaving the settlement house, books under their arms, voices animated with new words and ideas. They return to tenement rooms, to families who may or may not understand what they have learned, to streets that will test those lessons in ways no classroom can predict. You pause, looking back at the building. Its light spills onto the pavement, a small steady glow amid the flicker of gas lamps and the deeper shadows of the slum. It does not transform the neighbourhood overnight. It does not erase hardship, but it stands as a sign that someone believes change is possible even here. And just beyond that belief, another force waits, less gentle, more transactional, knocking on doors with promises, favours and expectations tied to the machinery of city politics. Politics does not arrive here as a speech from a distant marble building. It arrives at the door wearing a familiar hat. You see him on the landing. First, a ward worker, a local man with sharp eyes, decent shoes and a memory trained to hold names, birthdays, debts, illnesses, arrests, jobs and grudges. He knocks with confidence because he's expected, not always welcome, no, but expected. In this neighbourhood, formal government can feel far away while the political machine stands close enough to smell the soup. The door opens. A woman appears wiping her hands on her apron. Behind her, a child peers around her skirt. The ward worker asks after her husband mentions the baby's cough and says there may be coal available if the family needs it. Of course they need it. Everyone needs coal when winter begins pressing its cold fingers into the walls. He does not say vote for our man in so many words. He does not need to. The message sits in the hallway like another tenant. Urban political machines, including New York's Tammany Hall, built power by exchanging favours, jobs, food, fuel and legal help for votes and loyalty among working class and immigrant communities. That is the basic fact, but from inside the tenement it feels less like a theory and more like a transaction that might keep the stove alive. You follow him down the stairs and into the street. He pauses often, a nod to the grocer, a joke with a saloon keeper, a quiet word with a policeman, a promise to ask about a cousin's job, a reminder about registration. He knows which families are newly arrived, which men are naturalised citizens, which sons have just come of voting age, which widows need assistance, which shopkeepers can influence a whole cluster of neighbours. This is politics at sidewalk level. It smells like tobacco, rain cabbage and ink. It is not clean, but it is effective. At the corner, a political clubhouse glows with evening light. Men pass in and out, some wearing better coats than others, all carrying the air of people who belong to a system. Inside chairs scrape the floor. A stove ticks with heat. Posters cover the walls. A clerk writes names in a ledger. Someone argues about a ward boundary. Someone else laughs too loudly at a joke told by a man whose favour is useful. You sit near the wall and listen. Requests come steadily. A man wants a recommendation for work on the docks. A mother needs help getting her son out of trouble after a fight. A family faces eviction. Someone wants a city job, street sweeping perhaps, or a position in sanitation, a small but steady wage that might change everything. The club does not grant all wishes, it weighs them. There is a little oddity here that feels almost comic until you understand it. On election days, some machines offered voters' rides, meals, small payments or protective company to the polling place, making voting feel less like a private civic act and more like joining a neighbourhood procession with snacks and supervision. Democracy in this version comes with a checklist and someone making sure you do not wander off. Reformers despise this. They call it corruption, and often they are right. Ballot boxes can be manipulated. Jobs can be distributed through loyalty rather than merit. Public money can disappear into pockets deep enough to echo. Contractors get favours. Police look away. Saloon keepers become political brokers. The machine feeds itself. Yet the poor do not always experience reformers as rescuers. A reformer may promise honest government, but offer no coal tonight, no lawyer tomorrow, no job next week. The machine's morality may be muddy, but its timing is excellent. It arrives when the rent is due. Analysts of city life have long disagreed over whether machine politics mainly exploited immigrant poverty or gave newcomers a practical doorway into American civic life. Stand in this clubhouse long enough and you feel both truths leaning against the same stove. The machine teaches men how to vote, whom to know, where power lives, and how to ask for things. It also teaches dependents loyalty, silence and the price of favours. Outside, a young man practices an election speech with more enthusiasm than polish. He speaks of jobs, protection, dignity, honest representation and the interests of working people. The crowd half listens. One man asks if the speech comes with coal. Another asks if dignity can pay the butcher. The young speaker laughs, but not comfortably. The neighbourhood has a gift for editing rhetoric. Election season changes the streets. Posters appear on walls and fences. Bands may march. Candidates visit, shaking hands that they would not notice in other months. Children collect campaign buttons as saloons buzz with argument. Churches warn clubs, organised newspapers roar, and every stoop becomes a small parliament. You watch as a woman questions a ward worker about a promised basket of food. Women in many places cannot yet vote, but do not mistake that for political silence. They influence husbands, sons, brothers, boarders, neighbours. They judge which organisation helped when fever came, which man ignored a widow, which party sent coal and which sent lectures. Their political power moves through households and networks, not always through ballots. The ward worker understands this. He speaks respectfully, not because he is noble necessarily, but because he is not foolish. A mother who controls a dinner table may guide 3 voters before morning. Immigrant naturalization matters here too. Citizenship is not only a legal status, it is entry into the machine's arithmetic. New citizens may be courted intensely, translators explain ballots, party men help with papers. Sometimes the help is genuine, sometimes it is strategic, usually it is both. At a nearby saloon, men debate candidates over beer. One says the reform ticket will clean up the city, another says clean government does not feed children. A third says all politicians are thieves, but some thieves remember your name. That line gets approval because it is funny and possibly accurate, which is a dangerous combination. The city government reaches into daily life in ways easy to overlook. Streets garbage collection, policing building, inspection school, water transit licenses, permits, jobs. In a slum, these are not abstractions. A cleaner street means fewer flies. A building inspection might force repairs. A school appointment might help a child. A sanitation job might keep a family housed. Politics is the weather system behind ordinary survival. You return to the tenement just as a coal basket arrives for one family. The children watch with wide eyes. The mother thanks the delivery man, then looks down the hall aware of who is watching and who is not receiving. Help can create gratitude, resentment, and obligation all at once. Nothing in the building is private for long. A man on the landing mutters that he will not sell his vote for coal. Then he glances toward his own cold room. Principles are easier when the stove is warm. You do not judge him. Not here. Night falls and the clubhouse remains lit. Names continue entering ledgers. Promises continue leaving mouths. Some will be kept. Some will evaporate like steam. The machine turns powered by need, ambition, fear, loyalty, and the small favours that make large systems possible. You pause beneath a campaign poster curling at the edges. The candidate's face smiles down with smooth confidence, untouched by soot. Around you, the slum keeps breathing. Children lodgers cough sewing machines, frying onions, and the endless shuffle of feet on stairs. Here politics is not distant. It is intimate. It knocks bargains, remembers, forgets, and sometimes leaves a basket of coal. And in rooms lit by lamps and candles, another danger waits in the cluttered, dark fabric, wood, paper, kerosene, narrow stairs, and the sudden terror of fire. Fire is the fear that sleeps lightly. You feel it before you see it, not as flame, but as possibility. It hides in the kerosene lamp on the table, the coal stove in the corner, the match tucked near a child's curious fingers, the heap of cloth beside a sewing machine, the paper stuffed into wall cracks, the wooden staircase rubbed dry by thousands of feet. In a crowded tenement, fire does not need an invitation. It only needs a careless second. Night has returned, and the rooms glow with small flames. Lamps burn low, making yellow circles on tables and walls. A woman bends over mending. A child reads close to the light, too close, earning a warning without anyone looking up. The stove ticks softly. Somewhere in the building an iron is being heated. Somewhere else. A man strikes a match in the hallway because darkness has swallowed the stairs again. Around 1900, many tenement buildings were still crowded, poorly lit, and difficult to escape in emergencies, even after earlier housing laws required improvements like fire escapes in many cities. The law may exist on paper, but paper burns, and so does everything around it if the exits are narrow, blocked, or badly maintained. You step to the window and look at the fire escape. Iron ladders and platforms cling to the brick outside. They seem reassuring at first glance. There it is, safety bolted to the wall. But look again. A chair sits on one platform. Bedding has been hung over another. A crate blocks part of the passage. In summer, people sleep out there for air. In winter, snow and ice gather on the metal. Gather. In daily life, a fire escape is often treated like extra storage, a balcony, a drying rack, or a sleeping shelf. Safety under pressure becomes furniture. This is one of the quiet cruelties of poverty. A family knows a block fire escape is dangerous. They also know the room inside is too small for everything they own. Danger competes with immediate need, and immediate need often wins because it stands directly in front of you holding a laundry basket. Down the hall, the staircase drops into darkness. You imagine smoke filling it. The thought is enough to tighten your chest. Stairs are the building's throat. If fire catches below, everyone above must descend through heat and smoke or climb outward into cold air and iron. If panic begins, the narrowness becomes a trap. People push. Children cry, doors open, smoke spreads. A building that was merely uncomfortable becomes a maze with teeth. Firefighters exist and they are brave, but they're not magicians. Horse-drawn fire engines need streets clear enough to move. Hoses need water pressure. Ladders need access. Alarm boxes must be reached. Minutes matter. In these neighbourhoods, minutes are often spent shouting, searching for children, grabbing blankets, waking lodgers, and trying to understand whether the smell is smoke from a stove or disaster beginning in the next room. There is an odd but revealing detail from urban fire life. Some families kept important documents, coins, or treasured photos wrapped together in a small bundle that could be snatched quickly if danger came. Not everyone had much worth saving, but almost everyone had something that represented proof, memory, or hope. A baptism paper, a naturalization document, a letter from home, a wedding photograph. When flames come, identity itself must be portable. You hear a cry from below. Not fire this time, only a lamp knocked over and caught before it spread. The building reacts instantly. Doors open, feet sound on stairs. Someone shouts advice, someone shouts louder advice that is not better. A child begins crying because adults are frightened, and children understand fear faster than explanations. The lamp is set upright, the small flame smothered, and gradually the building exhales. But nobody truly relaxes. Everyone has heard stories. A family trapped upstairs, a child missing in smoke, a mother burned trying to reach a cradle, a whole block endangered because one room held cloth oil wood and bad luck in the same breath. The stories pass from neighbour to neighbour, part warning, part nightmare, part evidence that the city's promises cannot always reach a fourth-floor window. Debate among housing historians is often centred on whether fire danger pushed reform because officials cared about poor residents, because disasters embarrassed city leaders, or because overcrowded buildings threatened surrounding property. Probably all of these motives played a part which is not as comforting as one might hope. Human safety often receives attention faster when it becomes someone else's financial risk. You follow the smell of smoke toward a rear room where garment work continues late. Fabric scraps lie beneath the table. A lamp sits near folded cloth. The worker has placed it carefully, but careful is not the same as safe. Her eyes are tired. The needle moves more slowly now. Fatigue makes fingers clumsy. Clumsy fingers make accidents. Accidents in rooms like this do not stay personal for long. The walls themselves seem dry and watchful. Wood trim floorboards, doors, old furniture hanging, clothes, newspapers, baskets, mattress. A tenement room is full of fuel disguised as daily life. Add flame and the ordinary becomes ravenous. You step outside into the courtyard and look upward. Windows glow in stacked rows. Behind each one is a household, a sleeping child, a pot cooling on a stove, a lamp, not quite extinguished, a boarder snoring near the door. The building looks solid from outside, but you now understand how fragile it is. Brick may stand, but lives depend on stairs, locks, ladders, habits, and speed. Some reforms try to reduce the danger. Building codes tighten, inspections increase, fire escapes become more common. Later tenement designs require better light air and safer exits. Yet enforcement varies, and landlords do not always rush to spend money on people with little power. A cracked step can remain cracked until someone falls. A blocked hall can remain blocked until smoke needs that space. The city makes fire dramatic when it becomes visible, but the real dread lies in its ordinary ingredients. A mother trimming a lamp, a boy playing with matches, a stove door left open, a careless cigarette, an iron set down on cloth, a candle used because the hall is black. None of these begin as disasters. They begin as small practical acts. You return inside. The room is settling for sleep. The lamp is lowered. The stove is checked. Bedding is spread. A child asks if there will be a fire. An adult says no firmly because children need firmness and because adults need to hear themselves say it. Then after a pause, the adult checks the lamp again. The building quiets, but not completely. Somewhere a baby whimpers. Somewhere a man coughs. Somewhere a stove shifts with a metallic tick. You listen differently now. Every sound carries a question. Was that a footstep, a chair, a coal falling? The mind becomes its own night watchman. Eventually exhaustion wins. It usually does. People sleep because bodies demand it, not because the world has become safe. They sleep in rooms crowded with risk, trusting that morning will arrive before smoke does. And morning will bring another kind of trial, not sudden like flame, but slow and seasonal winter, pressing through cracked walls. Summer rotting the air, coal dust in the lungs, insects in the bedding and weather, finding every weakness the building has tried to hide. Winter arrives without knocking. You feel it first in the floorboards, a creeping chill that rises through your shoes and settles in your bones. The room that seemed merely crowded in autumn now becomes a place where every draught has a personality. Cold slips through window frames, under doors, along the edges of walls where plaster has given up trying to pretend it is solid. The stove becomes the centre of gravity, and everyone orbits it as closely as space allows. Coal is the difference between discomfort and danger. In many working-class homes of the early 1900s, coal served as the primary source of heat, and families often rationed it carefully to make limited supplies last through long winters. That simple fact shapes the season. Coal must be bought, carried, stored, measured, and guarded. A full scuttle feels like wealth. An empty one feels like a threat. You watch as a woman feeds the stove, adding just enough to keep the room livable. Too much and the supply runs out before the week ends. Too little and the cold settles in stiffening fingers, slowing work, inviting illness. The stove breathes heat into the air, but it also releases soot, a fine black dust that settles onto surfaces clothing skin and lungs. You wipe a finger across the table and it comes away grey. Children huddle near the warmth, their games quieter now. Hands stretch toward the stove, then pull back quickly when the heat bites. A baby is wrapped in layers, a small bundle of cloth and breath. The air smells of coal, damp wool and the faint metallic scent of the stove itself. Outside the streets harden. Snow falls not clean and white for long, but quickly turning to slush under hooves and wheels. Ice forms in patches, making every step uncertain. Water carried from the tap grows heavier with cold. Laundry freezes, if hung outside, stiffening into shapes that look like ghosts of clothing. You step into the hallway and feel the temperature drop immediately. The stairwell is colder than the rooms, the warmth of each apartment leaking only slightly into the shared space. Your breath fogs the air. A neighbour passes carrying a bucket of coal, each step deliberate to avoid slipping. The sound of boots on wood echoes differently in winter, sharper, more brittle. Summer, when it returns, brings its own kind of hardship. Heat does not creep, it presses. You remember the crowded room in warmer months, the way air seemed to thicken, until breathing felt like work. Windows open, but they offer little relief when the outside air is just as heavy. The sun bakes the brick walls, turning buildings into ovens that release heat slowly through the night. Sleep becomes shallow, interrupted, restless. In summer, the smells intensify, food spoils faster. Garbage ferments in the street, flies gather persistent and unwelcome. Water becomes even more precious, not just for drinking, but for washing away the stickiness that clings to skin and fabric. Children run barefoot, more often their feet toughened by necessity, but still vulnerable to cuts and infection. You step into the courtyard and see laundry strung across lines dripping in the heat. The air hums with insects. A cat slinks along a wall hunting. A woman fans herself with a piece of cardboard, her movements slow, conserving energy. The baby in her arms fusses, unable to understand why the world feels so uncomfortable. In both seasons, the building reveals its weaknesses. Cracks widen in cold letting in drafts. In heat, the same cracks allow insects to enter. Walls that seemed merely worn now feel like barriers that fail at their most basic job. The environment presses inward, shaping daily life as much as any social condition. There is a small, almost inventive detail that emerges from these extremes. Some families used blocks of ice purchased from street vendors to cool food and occasionally the air around them in summer. The ice sat in boxes or basins, melting slowly, offering a brief, localized relief. It was not a solution, but it was something a small negotiation with the season. The question of how much seasonal hardship influenced health and productivity has long occupied those who study these communities. Cold can weaken the body, making illness more likely. Heat can exhaust, reducing the ability to work. Both can strain already limited resources. The seasons are not just background, they are active participants in the story. You notice how routines adapt. In winter, people layer clothing even indoors and gather close to shared heat. In summer, they seek any hint of breeze, sleeping near windows, on fire escapes, or even rooftops when possible. The building expands and contracts with the weather, not physically, but in how it is used. A man returns home in winter, his coat dusted with snow, his face red from cold. He stamps his feet, rubs his hands, and moves toward the stove. The warmth is immediate, almost shocking. He sighs, a sound of relief that carries the weight of the day. In summer, the same man returns with sweat darkening his shirt, seeking a place to sit where air might move even slightly. Children adapt quickly. In winter, they find ways to play that keep them warm, running, jumping, inventing games that involve movement. In summer, they slow down, seeking shade splashing in whatever water they can find, even if it is not particularly clean. Their resilience is impressive, but it is not infinite. You step back into the room, feeling the contrast between outside and inside. The stove glows in winter. The window strains in summer. The family adjusts, always adjusting, because the environment does not offer alternatives. As evening approaches, the light changes again. In winter, darkness comes early, pushing people indoors, compressing activity into fewer hours. In summer, the day lingers, allowing the street to remain active, longer children playing adults, talking life, stretching into the night. You understand now that the slum is not static. It shifts with the seasons, each bringing its own challenges, its own rhythms, its own demands. Survival here is not just about navigating social structures, but about enduring and adapting to the natural world as it presses against human effort. And within these shifting conditions, moments of joy still find their way through small but persistent waiting in the spaces where laughter can still rise despite everything. Joy does not ask whether the room is large enough. It simply squeezes in. You notice it first in the sound of laughter rising from a stoop, bright and sudden, cutting through the weight of coal smoke, laundry steam, and the sour smell of the gutter. A girl laughs with her head thrown back and one hand pressed to her mouth, as if trying to keep the sound from escaping too far. She fails completely, and thank goodness. The block needs it. The day has been hard, because most days here are hard. Children have worked, or studied, or carried errands. Women have cooked, washed, stitched, bargained, scolded, soothed, and done the impossible mathematics of hunger. Men have searched for wages, found them or not, and returned with bodies shaped by labour. Yet evening opens a little pocket of time, and into that pocket people place whatever happiness they can afford. A plain historical truth is that amusement in working-class urban neighbourhoods around 1900 often centred on low-cost pleasures such as street games, music, church socials, penny arcades, dance halls, public parks, nickel theatres and neighbourhood celebrations. Not luxury, not quiet leisure with a velvet chair and a silver tea service, but quick, vivid pleasures that fit between shifts and rent days. You follow the music first. Someone has brought out a fiddle. It's not perfectly tuned, but perfection is a fussy guest and was not invited. The tune starts thin and gains confidence. A few people clap along. A boy taps a rhythm on an overturned crate. A woman watching from a window smiles despite herself. The street becomes a small theatre without tickets, curtains, or anyone telling the children not to block the view. A young couple steps into a dance, not a grand ballroom dance, of course. No polished floor, no chandeliers, no orchestra, pretending not to sweat. Just pavement, a fiddle, a few claps, and two people who want to be young for 10 uninterrupted minutes. Their shoes scuff the stones, their faces soften. Around them others cheer, tease, and laugh. For all the hardship, celebrations still matter. Weddings spill into courtyards and halls. Baptisms and naming ceremonies bring relatives together. Religious holidays transform rooms with candles, food songs, and memory. National festivals from old homelands survive, in altered forms, adjusted to American streets, but not erased by them. A holiday meal may be humble, but it carries the taste of belonging. You step into a tenement room where a wedding gathering has squeezed itself into existence. There are too many people naturally. The air is warm with bodies and cooking. A table holds bread, pickles, potatoes, maybe fish, maybe a small cake that everyone pretends is enough for all. Someone has borrowed chairs. Someone else's stands because standing is easier than admitting the chairs ran out. The bride's dress is carefully mended, perhaps borrowed, perhaps remade from something older. The groom looks nervous in a collar that's trying to defeat him. Guests speak over one another in several languages. Child steals a sweet and is caught by 3 adults, which is less a failure of theft than a reminder that surveillance in crowded rooms is excellent. A small offbeat detail appears in entertainments of the period. Rooftop gatherings could become improvised summer parlours with families carrying chairs, bedding, food and gossip upward to catch a breeze above the trapped heat of the rooms. It sounds almost charming until you remember the stairs, the tar, the soot, and the very real possibility of someone dropping a spoon 5 stories to its dramatic retirement. Still, on a hot night, a roof can feel like a private kingdom made of brick sky and relief. You climb to one now. The rooftop opens above you, and the city spreads in a jagged field of chimneys, laundry lines, church towers, factory stacks, and pale evening light. The air is not clean exactly, but it moves. That alone feels like mercy. Families sit in clusters. A grandmother tells stories. Children chase one another until warned away from the edge. A man smokes and says very little. A young woman looks toward the horizon, perhaps imagining a life less crowded, perhaps just enjoying the fact that nobody is asking her to stir anything. Down below, the street continues, but up here distance softens it. Wheels rumble like muted drums. Voices blur into one large human murmur. The smell of garbage weakens, replaced by tar-smoke damp cloth and the faint sweetness of someone's fruit peel. You breathe more deeply, so does everyone else. Pleasure also comes in pennies. A child may buy candy, a paper toy, a roasted chestnut, a ride on a carousel if one is nearby, or a look through a peep show. Viewer that reveals moving images, comic scenes, faraway places, or stage melodrama. Adults may save for a nickel theatre where short films flicker in the dark and strangers sit shoulder to shoulder momentarily transported. Imagine spending all day in a room with no privacy, then paying to sit in a dark room with even more strangers. Humanity is complicated, but at least there are pictures. Researchers sometimes differ on how to interpret these small amusements. Were they escapes that dulled anger and made hardship bearable? Or were they the expressions of community strength that helped people endure without surrendering identity? The answer depends on where you stand. A dance can distract. It can also remind people they have bodies for joy, not just labour. A song can soothe. A song. It can also carry memory across oceans. A game can waste time. It can also teach children confidence, rules, cheating, forgiveness, and how to shout with style. In The Street Boys play stickball again, this time with an audience. A girl keeps score with terrifying authority. One player argues. She glares. The argument dies at once. Good administration is rare and should be respected. A younger child runs after the ball when it disappears under a cart emerging, dusty but triumphant, holding it high like a trophy rescued from war. At the stoop, women share stories. Some are funny, some sharp, some tragic beneath the humour. A good storyteller can make a whole group lean closer. She describes a landlord slipping on ice, a pompous reformer misunderstanding a phrase, a child telling a teacher something deeply embarrassing about home life. The listeners laugh not cruelly, but with recognition. Laughter turns humiliation into property. Once you can tell the story, it belongs to you. Food becomes joy too, even when simple. A hot pretzel split between siblings. A pickle eaten straight from the barrel. A cup of sweetened tea after a bitter day. A holiday pastry made with ingredients saved carefully over weeks. Taste carries comfort into the body faster than philosophy ever could. You see courtship at the edges, a glance across a stoop, a walk to the corner, a conversation supervised by half the neighbourhood pretending not to supervise. Romance here must be clever. Privacy is scarce, so feeling learns to hide inside jokes, errands, church events, dances, and the passing of small objects. A ribbon, a flower, a borrowed book. A note folded so many times it becomes almost a secret by shape alone. Night deepens. A song rises from one window, then another voice joins from across the shaft. For a moment, the ugly air shaft, that channel of smells and arguments, becomes a corridor of music. It is not enough to fix anything, but it is enough to change the hour. You realise that joy in the slums is not the opposite of hardship. It grows through it, around it, sometimes because of it. People laugh loudly because the day has been long. They dance because their feet have carried burdens. They celebrate because loss is nearby and everyone knows it. They decorate, sing, flirt, feast, joke and play, not because life is easy, but because life is theirs. As the last notes fade, another kind of visitor waits at the edge of the neighbourhood. The reporter with a notebook, the photographer with a flash, the reformer with an agenda, all trying to capture what this life means and not always seeing clearly in the smoke. The next visitor arrives carrying a notebook. You see him pause at the mouth of the street, taking in the crowded windows, the laundry lines, the push carts, the children, the dark hallway beyond the tenement door. He is not from here. His shoes tell you that first, then his posture, then the way his eyes move, hungry for detail, but uncertain where to rest. He has come to observe, record, describe, perhaps expose. He may be sincere, he may be curious, he may be building a career on other people's misery. Often, of course, he is doing several things at once. This is the age when slums become subjects. Reporters, reformers, photographers, charity workers, ministers, and social investigators enter crowded districts with pens, cameras, maps, moral judgments, and sometimes genuine compassion. They count rooms, they describe smells, they measure air shafts, they interview families, they photograph sleeping children, dark staircases, rag pickers, pushcart markets and rooms where work and life are tangled together like thread in a sewing basket. One established historical fact is that Jacob Rios's 1890 book How the Other Half Lives used flash photography and reporting to show middle-class readers the crowded tenement conditions of New York City. By 1900, his influence still hangs over reform conversations. He gave the hidden city a face, though not always a face its residents would have chosen for themselves. You follow a photographer into a hallway. He carries equipment that feels awkward and magical. Flash photography is still startling, involving a burst of light that can turn a dark room into a scene of sudden exposure. Imagine sitting half asleep in your crowded kitchen when a stranger ignites a miniature lightning storm and says in effect, "Please continue being poor, this is very important." History does have manners sometimes, but not always. The family inside stiffens. The mother smooths a child's hair. A man sits straighter. Someone removes a stray cloth from the table. Even poverty arranges itself before a camera. That is one of the problems. A photograph seems truthful because it freezes reality, but people change when they know they're being seen. The lens captures fact and performance together. A peculiar detail from this world of documentation is that early flash powder could be smoky, loud, and startling enough to frighten people in small rooms. Some accounts describe the sudden burst as almost theatrical, which means the very act of revealing darkness briefly filled it with smoke and spectacle. A tidy metaphor, if a rather rude one. The reporter asks questions. How many live here? How much rent? How many windows? Is anyone sick? Does the child attend school? Are there lodgers? The answers come carefully. People have reasons to be cautious. Too much honesty might bring help or inspection or eviction or shame. A stranger with a notebook can be doorway or trap. Outside, children gather around the visitor excited by the novelty. They pose, laugh, mock his accent, ask if he will pay, and generally behave like children everywhere when confronted with adult seriousness. One boy makes a face just as the notebook opens. Another claims to know the saddest family on the block for a fee. The reporter does not know whether to be amused or annoyed. The children know exactly what they're doing. Public portrayals of slum life often shaped reform. Stories of overcrowding, child labour disease and unsafe buildings stirred middle-class concern and pressured officials to act. Housing laws, sanitation campaigns, playground movements, public bath settlement, work and labour reforms all drew energy from the act of making suffering visible, without the witnesses. Some abuses might have remained easier to ignore, and yet visibility has its own dangers. A room can become a symbol so quickly that the people inside it disappear. A mother becomes the poor immigrant woman. A child becomes the street Arab, as some writers cruelly called homeless or wandering children. A neighbourhood becomes a problem as if it were not also a home, workplace, school, market, church, memory, chest and world. Social historians continue to question how much reform photography revealed truth and how much it staged poverty through the assumptions of outsiders. The question matters because images do not merely show the past. They teach later generations how to imagine it. If every picture is dark, filthy and desperate, you may forget the laughter on the roof, the careful mending of a dress, the pride in a shop sign, the child carrying a book home from school. You step into a newspaper office in your mind where the slum becomes ink. Editors choose phrases. Headlines sharpen. The city's poor are presented to readers who may sip coffee in clean parlours while feeling shock, pity, fear or superiority. Some readers donate. Some demand reform. Some simply enjoy the thrill of moral tourism. Human nature again refusing to dress itself nicely. There are guided slumming excursions too, where wealthier people visit poor districts for curiosity, reform, interest or entertainment. They peer into ethnic neighborhoods, taste unfamiliar foods, watch crowded street life and return home with stories. Sometimes these visits create sympathy. Sometimes they turn human hardship into an evening's amusement. The difference depends less on the route than on the soul of the visitor, and souls are notoriously difficult to regulate. You watch one such party pass, their clothes are careful, their eyes are wide. A guide points out a notorious building, a crowded alley, a shop with foreign lettering. Residents notice them at once, some ignore them, some stare back. A few perform for them exaggerating gestures or offering jokes. It is not a one-way gaze. The observed also observe, and they may find the visitors just as strange. Reform myths grow easily. One myth says the slum is only a place of vice, as if poverty itself were a moral failure. Another says every immigrant family simply climbs upward through hard work, as if discrimination, illness, unsafe labour and bad housing were minor inconveniences, like a rainy picnic. Another imagines reformers as pure heroes forgetting their blind spots. Still another imagines residents as helpless, ignoring their network's skills, humour, and stubborn intelligence. The truth is slower, quieter, and more crowded. Slum life is real hardship, not picturesque grit. It is also not one flat story. A building can contain exploitation and ambition, neglect and care, danger and music, suffering and jokes about cabbage. The worst mistake is to make the people smaller than their conditions. Some investigators understand this better than others. A careful settlement worker learns names, listens, returns, and notices contradictions. A sensational reporter looks for the dirtiest corner and leaves. A photographer seeking reform may crop out signs of dignity because despair sells the argument more quickly. Another may capture tenderness by accident, a child's hand on a mother's sleeve. A proud man standing in a narrow doorway, a girl holding a schoolbook like a passport. You return to the street with new caution. After all these sections of walking, listening, and breathing the air, you have seen how easy it would be to misread the place. From a distance, the slum becomes a single dark stain on the city map. Up close, it is 1,000 lives rubbing against one another, each with its own clock, language, fear, joke, and plan for tomorrow. The photographer packs his equipment. The reporter closes his notebook. The reformer adjusts her gloves. They leave with impressions, some useful, some distorted. Behind them, the block continues without waiting to become history. A woman buys onions. A boy runs past with newspapers. A man coughs at a window. Laundry shifts in the evening air. Soon, some families will leave these streets for better rooms, steadier work, or neighbourhoods with wider skies. Others will remain held by rent-kin illness, prejudice, or simple lack of money. And all of them, whether leaving or staying, will carry the tenement with them in ways no photograph can fully hold. Leaving is not a single moment, it is a slow loosening. You see it begin in small changes. A man finds steadier work, not perfect but regular enough, that coins gather instead of vanishing. A woman takes on fewer lodgers because the rent no longer demands every inch of space. A child brings home school books that are not immediately set aside for chores. These are not grand victories, but they shift the balance of the room almost imperceptibly at first. Some families move, not far, not to mansions or quiet streets with trees whispering in the wind, but to slightly better buildings, fewer people per room. A window that opens onto something more than a narrow shaft. It might be another neighbourhood entirely or just a few blocks away. The distance is measured less in miles and more in breath, a little more air, a little more light, a little less noise pressing against the walls. At the dawn of the 20th century, upward mobility for some immigrant families in American cities often meant gradual movement out of the most crowded tenements into slightly improved housing as wages increased and children contributed income. It was rarely a leap. More often it was a series of careful steps, each one earned, each one fragile. You follow one such family as they prepare to leave. The room looks different when it is being emptied. The bed frame is dismantled, the table cleared, the few possessions gathered into bundles. A chair that once held a child now leans against the wall waiting to be carried down the stairs. The space seems smaller and larger at the same time, as if it is revealing how much life it held. There is excitement, yes, but also hesitation. This room has been difficult, but it has also been home. It has witnessed births, arguments, meals, laughter, sickness, recovery, small triumphs, quiet grief. Leaving means stepping into uncertainty again, even if the next place promises improvement. The known hardship has a strange familiarity. The unknown carries both hope and risk. You notice how neighbours react. Some offer congratulations genuine and warm. Others watch quietly, perhaps measuring their own chances, perhaps feeling left behind. A few help carry bundles because moving is labour, and labour shared becomes lighter. The stairwell fills with voices, footsteps, and the echo of something ending and something beginning. Children experience the move differently. One is thrilled imagining new streets, new games, new friends. Another clings to the familiar, reluctant to leave the alley, where every corner holds a memory. A third simply enjoys the adventure of carrying small items, feeling important in the process. Not everyone leaves. Many remain held in place by low wages, unstable work illness, or the simple fact that better housing costs more than they can pay. The slum does not empty itself quickly. It continues to receive new arrivals even as some depart. Ships bring fresh waves of immigrants, each carrying hope, fear, and a small bundle of belongings. The cycle continues. There is a conversation among those who study these patterns about how much of this movement reflects opportunity and how much reflects displacement. When rents rise, when buildings are condemned, when neighbourhoods change, families may move not by choice but by necessity. Progress for some can mean pressure for others. The city rearranges itself and people adjust as best they can. You walk through a block where some buildings have been altered, improved, slightly cleaned, perhaps painted. Others remain as they were worn and crowded. The contrast is visible. It tells a story of uneven change of reform that reaches some places more quickly than others. A small, curious detail appears in the process of moving. Families often carry their most valuable items themselves rather than trusting them to strangers. A wrapped bundle held close might contain not only practical goods but also documents, letters, photographs, small heirlooms. These objects carry identity across addresses. They are the threads that tie one home to another. You pause at a doorway where an older woman sits watching the movement. She has seen families come and go for years. She knows the rhythm of it. She may never leave herself, whether by choice or circumstance. Her world is this block, these walls, these neighbours. She measures time not in calendars, but in the faces that pass her door. For those who do leave, memory travels with them. A man in a better apartment still remembers the narrow staircase, the smell of the hallway, the sound of the pushcarts. A woman in a cleaner kitchen still measures flour the way she learned when it was scarce. Children who grow into adults carry the lessons of crowded rooms into wider spaces. They remember how to share, how to stretch, how to notice small changes that others might overlook. Some return to visit. They walk the old streets with a mixture of pride and discomfort. They point out buildings to their own children, telling stories that sound almost unreal. We lived there, they say, and the child looks at the crumbling facade and tries to imagine it filled with life. Others avoid returning, choosing to let the past remain where it was. Not all memories are easy to revisit. Some carry too much weight. The neighbourhood itself changes over time. New groups arrive. Old languages fade or shift. Shops change hands. Buildings are altered, demolished, rebuilt. The slum is not static. It evolves, sometimes improving, sometimes simply transforming into a different kind of hardship. There is an ongoing discussion among observers about whether these changes represent genuine improvement or merely the movement of poverty from one place to another. The answer, as often, is layered. Conditions may improve in one district while worsening in another. Progress is uneven, sometimes frustratingly so. You stand at the edge of the block watching a family disappear around the corner with their bundles. Their future is uncertain, but it holds possibility. Behind you, the tenements remain filled with people who will continue the daily work of living, adapting, enduring. The city stretches beyond this neighbourhood, offering opportunities and challenges in equal measure. For some, the slum is a starting point, a place to gather strength before moving on. For others, it is a long-term reality shaped by forces that are difficult to escape. As evening approaches, the familiar sounds return, children play, vendors call, doors open and close. Life continues, layered with departures and arrivals, with memories carried forward and new stories beginning. You turn away, following the path of those who have left, while the streets behind you hold the echoes of everything that has happened within them. Dawn comes softly, almost politely, as if the city knows it has been asking too much. You stand at the edge of the tenement block while the first light touches the roofs, chimneys, fire escapes, and damp stones below. The street is not yet loud, but it is preparing. A cart creaks in the distance. A milk wagon passes with a faint clatter. Somewhere a stove door opens, somewhere else. A child turns in sleep, unwilling to surrender the last warm minutes before morning work begins. The tenements look different at dawn. Less theatrical than at night, less crowded than at noon. Their brick faces appear tired, smudged with soot and age. Windows reflect pale light. Laundry hangs limp from lines. A cat steps carefully along a wall as if inspecting the city before approving its continuation. By the early 20th century, housing reform laws in cities like New York gradually required better light ventilation, indoor toilets, and safer building standards, though Many older tenements remained crowded and difficult for years. That fact matters because reform does not arrive like a curtain dropping between misery and comfort. It seeps in unevenly. One building improves, another waits. One family benefits, another moves into the same bad room someone else escaped. You walk past a newer tenement with a wider courtyard, larger windows and more attention to air. It is still not luxury. Please do not picture marble sinks and cheerful breakfast nooks, but compared with the darkest rear rooms and airless old flats, it feels almost generous. Sunlight reaches places where shadows once settled. A toilet inside the building changes daily life. A window that actually breathes can feel revolutionary. Still, laws require enforcement, and enforcement requires will. Landlords resist costs. Inspectors may be overworked, pressured, careless, or corrupt. Families may not know their rights or may fear eviction if they complain. Reform is not only written by lawmakers. It must climb stairs, open doors, check pipes, measure rooms, and insist that poor people deserve more than survival. Some city blocks are demolished over time. Others are rebuilt. Public health campaigns continue. Playgrounds appear where children once used gutters as recreation. Schools expand. Settlement workers push for sanitation labour protections and safer housing. Unions grow stronger in some trades. Fire regulations tighten after terrible lessons. The city slowly and unevenly begins to admit that private suffering inside crowded rooms can become a public responsibility. Students of urban history still disagree about how much reform came from compassion, fear of unrest, public health, necessity, immigrant political power, or the simple desire to make cities more efficient. Probably all of these motives walk together, not always arm in arm. Reform can be noble and practical at once. It can also be incomplete, self-congratulating, and far too late for many who needed it sooner. You pause outside the doorway where your walk began. The hall is still dark, the stairs still creak, the smells still rise, though perhaps in time they will change. A woman steps out with a pail, a boy hurries past with the newspapers, a man adjusts his coat and heads toward work, hopeful enough to keep moving. The daily rhythm continues because history is not finished just because a narrator is nearing the end. There is one final small detail to carry with you. Some former tenement residents, after moving away, kept photographs, recipes, songs, or even old household objects from those cramped years. Not because they missed the hardship, but because memory is complicated. A chipped cup may remember hunger, yes, but also a mother's hand. A song may recall exhaustion, but also a rooftop breeze. People do not leave the past in neat bundles by the curb. The slums of 1900s America were not only places of misery, though misery lived there with confidence. They were also places of adaptation, culture, labour, laughter, danger, illness, ambition, political bargaining, and astonishing endurance. They held garment workers and dock labourers, mothers and boarders, children and reformers, policemen and ward bosses, vendors and nurses, musicians and photographers, all moving through narrow rooms and noisy streets. You have walked through hunger and heat through winter, coal and summer rot through wash, water, fire, fear, street games, political favours, sick rooms and crowded beds. You have seen people squeezed by structures larger than themselves, rent wages, discrimination, bad housing, weak laws, and the blunt indifference of a fast-growing industrial city. But you have also seen people answer those pressures with skill, humour, bargaining, care, and stubborn presence. The tenement district does not vanish completely. Its buildings may be torn down, renovated, absorbed into tourist maps, remembered in museum exhibits, or hidden beneath newer apartments with nicer names. Yet the questions remain familiar. Who gets clean air? Who gets safe housing? Who does the unseen labour? Who profits from overcrowding? Who is called disorderly for surviving conditions they did not create? The past does not ask these questions loudly at dawn. It asks them in softer ways, in the worn groove of a stair, in a photograph of children on a fire escape, in the memory of bread sliced thin, in a public bathhouse tile, in the old joke about pickles strong enough to walk away, in the way a city can celebrate progress while forgetting the bodies that carried it upward. You take one last look at the block. The sun is higher now, turning windows gold for a moment. The effect is almost tender. The brick softens, the street glimmers, even the gutter catches light which seems like a generous gesture from the morning. People begin again, they always do, doors open, buckets swing, voices rise, bread is bought, work is chased, children dart between adults. A woman leans from a window and calls a name that may be answered from 3 directions at once. The city does not pause to admire them, but you can. And perhaps that is the quiet lesson waiting here at the end of the walk history is not only presidents, wars, inventions and speeches. It is also the person carrying water upstairs before breakfast, the child translating a notice, the mother stretching soup, the worker stitching under poor light, the family sleeping close because there is no room to sleep apart. Daily life is history too, and sometimes it is the hardest kind to survive. Now the block grows brighter, and you step away gently, leaving the tenements to their mourning. The noise softens behind you. The pushcarts become a murmur, the stairwell a shadow, the coughing windows a fading memory. You're no longer carrying the pail or climbing the narrow steps or listening for bubble of fire in the dark. You're only walking slowly, through the cool light that gathers at the edge of the day. Let the street recede. Let the brick walls loosen their hold on your imagination. Let the crowded rooms open into air. The people you have met remain where history keeps them, not forgotten, not flattened, but resting now in the gentle distance of memory. Their work is done for tonight. Their lamps are lowered. Their children are sleeping. Even the restless city seems to breathe more slowly. You can leave the coal dust on the windowsill. You can leave the washwater in the basin. You can leave the vendor's call drifting down the block softer and softer, until it becomes only a tone in the background like rain beyond a closed window. The dawn widens. The rooftops grow pale. Somewhere above the tenements, above the smoke, above the laundry lines and crowded stairs, the sky is clear and patient. It has seen all of this before. It holds no hurry. So breathe in gently. Breathe out slowly. The old streets fade into quiet and the hard rooms of the past become still. You have walked through them with care, and now you may step away with care too, carrying only the softer lesson that ordinary lives matter, that endurance leaves traces, and that even in the narrowest places people found ways to keep warmth, memory and hope alive. Rest now. The lamps are low, the street is distant, and morning can wait. Sweet dreams.